Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Hokage. I managed to survive until I became the boss of Sannin. Chapter 21. At this time, Sarutobi Hiruzen felt that he was about to die. It was not that he had not seen the strength of Golden Horn before, when he followed Master Tobirama to Union Village. The two brothers, Golden Horn and Silver Horn, launched a coup in front of them and killed Second Hokage. However, he did not expect that Jinzhao at that time had not yet shown his strongest side. Later, in order to cover them, Senju Tobirama went to fight against the two gold and silver horns alone, but he did not see the battle. During this year, although he had thought about revenge, he knew very well that the strength of the two brothers was not something he could face. After actually getting his hands on it today, he realized that he had estimated the Golden Horn's strength too conservatively. If we put aside the special situation of blood inheritance boundary, we can actually evaluate the strength of a ninja mainly from the three aspects of chakra, taijutsu and ninjutsu. If we compare Sarutobi Hiruzen and Golden Horn, except for ninjutsu, Sarutobi Hiruzen is far weaker than Golden Horn in other two categories. However, Jinzhao has a ninja tool left over from Sage of Six Paths, a banana fan. This is a weapon that ignores its own chakra properties and can release the changes in the five properties of fire, water, thunder, wind, and earth at once. Although using it requires a large amount of chakra, for a guy like Golden Horn whose chakra is comparable to a tailed beast, this is not a restriction at all. Due to this weapon, Sarutobi Hiruzen's only ninjutsu advantage was also wiped out. Moreover, because Jinzhao used one of his students to ambush him at the beginning, he suffered a lot of damage at the beginning of the war. And once this disadvantage is grasped by a ninja with profound experience like Jinzhao, it will be difficult to make a comeback. Even so, under his various ninjutsu, the two of them can still maintain a fragile balance. But this balance was instantly broken when Golden Horn directly chose to transform into Nine Tails tailed beast code not long after the battle. Looking at the red monster with six tails shaking in front of him, like a little nine tails, Sarutobi Hiruzen felt an unusually evil chakra. The Golden Horn in front of him seemed to have lost his mind, and he kept muttering, "Die, you all must die." With the roar of the last word, death, he suddenly turned into a red light and rushed towards Sarutobi Hiruzen. Although he was prepared, the opponent's speed increased far beyond his estimate. Boom! There was a sound of physical collision, and Hiruzen Sarutobi turned into a black shadow and was knocked away. The dust mist dispersed, and Sarutobi Hiruzen reluctantly stood up from the debris. But the red light flashed again, and Sarutobi Hiruzen, who had just stood up, was knocked away again. With the sound of collisions one after another, Sarutobi Hiruzen was like a ball being continuously knocked away. But as a shadow-level powerhouse, he is not completely incapable of parrying. After gradually adapting to the opponent's speed, he used the Rui Vajra Rod transformed from the Ape King and the Ape Demon to resist the subsequent attacks. Although he was still being knocked back continuously, the actual damage he received was not strong. Boom! With the last collision, Sarutobi Hiruzen finally stood firm on the ground after breaking a huge tree. Although his hands were firmly holding the diamond rod at this time, his trembling arms showed his fatigue. With a swish sound, the Golden Horn transformed into a tailed beast appeared on the tree in front of him. On the face that had turned into a black shadow were two white eyes without eyes. He looked down at the tiny human on the ground with his emotionless eyes, and slowly opened his mouth. The six tails behind him stand upright and surround the front. A huge chakra slowly gathered, and a black light bead slowly appeared in front of the mouth. The moment he saw the black light bead, a trace of fear flashed in Sarutobi Hiruzen's eyes. This is Tailed Beast Jade. Without hesitation, he quickly formed a seal, and a water dragon with thunder suddenly appeared in front of him. This is a type of ninjutsu that combines water-style ninjutsu and lightning-style ninjutsu to create charged water dragon bullets that attack the enemy. Thunder Water Dragon Bomb. As if they had agreed, after a brief moment of silence, the two charged at each other simultaneously with their long charged attacks. Two attacks, one black and one blue, met in midair and then became stalemate with each other. However, this stalemate could not last for a few seconds. As the black-tailed beast Jade became larger and larger, the blue one was slowly retreating. As the tailed beast jade grew to its maximum size, it instantly swallowed up the thunder and water dragon bullet and flew towards Sarutobi Hiruzen. A black light flashed, and starting from the golden horn, 100-meter-long straight line ran through the entire forest. At the end of the straight line, Hiruzen Sarutobi was lying on the ground, obviously unconscious. Seeing the fallen enemy, Golden Horn finally dissipated his tailed beast clothing state. Jumping down from the tree, he staggered and shook before finally regaining his balance. At this time, he no longer had the arrogance he had when he appeared on the stage, and was looking at Sarutobi Hiruzen in the distance with a slight breath. Obviously, he did not win this battle as easily as he imagined. He said unwillingly, "If it weren't for those two guys Tobirama and I." Then, he took several deep breaths and finally regained his composure. "Slowly walk forward, preparing to deal with this third Hokage with your own hands." At this time, a slightly childish voice sounded beside him. "Really, Lord Jinzhou, your condition doesn't look as good as you imagined." Quote. Hearing this, Jinzhou stopped and turned around to look over. What caught his eye was the imp Uchiha who had resisted his pursuit twice before. Uchiha Kagura. After seeing Golden Horn transform into a tailed beast in the distance, he hesitated for a moment and chose to come over. In order to ensure safety, he stayed several kilometers away from the battlefield. So even with all his strength, when he arrived at the scene, Sarutobi Hiruzen had already fallen. However, when he saw Jinzhou's shaky figure when he got off the ground and what he said to himself, he knew that he had made the right bet. Something is wrong with Golden Horn. Looking at the young man in front of him, Jinzhou narrowed his eyes and did not answer his question out loud. Kagura ignored him and continued. "You must have suffered a lot of damage from the battle last year before Master Tobirama's death. What's more, there is the third Raikage, known as the strongest spear, chasing after you. Your body may never be able to return to its best condition." Quote. Hearing the words of third Raikage, Jinzhou's eyes narrowed. Logically speaking, the matter of the third Raikage when he was chasing his two brothers should still be kept secret. He didn't know why the genin from Konoha in front of him knew about it. He finally answered calmly, "Oh, what else do you know? As for my strength, even your Lord Third Hokage fell, you don't deserve to know." Quote. Hearing this, Kagura laughed instead. He laughed and said, "You're not denying it, are you? Then I would like to ask Lord Jinzhou, why do you only see the banana fan among the 5 props from Sage of 6 Paths in your hand? Also, where is your brother Ginkgo-sama? Could it be?" Having said this, he glanced at the legendary ninja in front of him maliciously and continued. "Has your brother's head been taken back by Master I to pay tribute to Master Second Raikage?" After hearing these words, Jinzhou, who had a violent personality, finally couldn't suppress the anger in his heart. A flash of lightning flashed, and he appeared in front of Kagura. His right hand turned into a knife and cut into Kagura's chest fiercely. However, the imaginary feeling of flesh and blood did not come from his hands, and the young man with the hateful smile in front of him slowly faded and disappeared. "Is this genjutsu?" But before he could make another move, hundreds of Kagura figures suddenly appeared around him. Kagura's slightly crazy voice came from all directions. "He, ha ha ha, unexpectedly, I really guessed it. Even my genjutsu didn't see through it. Lord Golden Horn, your state is definitely not right. One day I will have the opportunity to kill a legendary ninja. This is really wonderful. I never thought that one day I would have the opportunity to kill a legendary figure like you. This is wonderful." As hundreds of sounds rang out from all around, the gathering sounds startled the birds in the entire forest. The echoes and the cries of hundreds of birds gave Jinzhou a headache, and he subconsciously blocked out all the noisy sounds. A ferocious smile appeared on his face again, and he shouted loudly. "Uchiha brat, do you think that just a little genjutsu can scare me? Although I'm not good at genjutsu, but..." As he spoke, he was already forming a seal with one hand. "Untie!" With an angry roar, the hundreds of Kagura around suddenly disappeared. But the real scene before him shocked him again. There were 5 Kagura standing in front of him, but what surprised him was not the number of his opponent's clones, but his form. At this time, Kagura has transformed into one tail beast suit form. Unlike Golden Horn's chakra, which exudes bloodthirsty and violence. The tailed beast clothing on Kagura's body at this time is in a milky white form. It really seemed like he was just wearing a translucent raincoat, with a tail wagging behind him. The aura of the tailed beast's clothing was calm and warm, without any trace of the crazy aura of the tailed beast. Apart from that, the most noticeable thing is his eyes. At this time, the magatama in his eyes was rotating rapidly, and there was even a trace of blood and tears in the corners of his eyes. It is obviously a performance that pushes distinguished heavenly gods to the extreme. Seeing this situation, a serious look appeared on Jin Zhao's face for the first time. He asked Kagura directly, "Kid, are you wearing a tailed beast suit?" "No, there is no tailed beast aura. But why does it have the same power as the tailed beast? And you weird Sharingan?" Faced with Golden Horn's question, Kagura did not make any answer. At this time, his previously broken right hand was restored to its original state under the healing and strengthening effects of the tailed beast clothing. The five, Kagura, slowly drew out the shurikens from their waists at the same time, and with a teleportation, they flashed in front of Golden Horn at the same time. At this time, Kagura's taijutsu, ijutsu, and chakra had greatly increased under the reinforcement of the tailed beast clothes. If he had to quantify it, he already had Jonin's strength at this time, and it was the kind of Jonin's strength that was close to the cage level qualification. Facing Kagura's attack, Golden Horn smiled contemptuously. However, just when he made a move, Kagura's unique Sharingan flashed in his eyes. When he was about to raise his hand to fight back, he was stunned for half a second. For ninja battles, a half-second delay can already determine many things. Chang! 5 Kagura's shurikens stabbed Jin Zhao's chest accurately, but there was a sound of metal collision. "TCH, it's really not that simple," Kagura muttered, but his body did not stop. 5 Kagura kicked Golden Horn at the same time. Boom! Golden Horn was knocked backwards by this neat kick, smashing several trees along the way and stirring up a cloud of dust. The Kagura did not pursue, but stopped where they were, staring intently at the dust mist. Slowly, Golden Horn's huge body gradually emerged from the gray mist. A trace of lightning flashed all over his body, and it was obvious that he had strengthened his body with lightning style. This was also the reason why Kagura's shuriken just couldn't penetrate his body. Still with a ferocious smile on his face, he looked at Kagura and said, "You kid, you want to kill me. I'm afraid I can't do it with such strength." The figures of both sides disappeared, and they chose to rush towards each other at the same time. Unexpectedly, in the next battle, both of them chose close combat. While relying on the strengthening of tailed beast transformation, and the harassment of shadow clone and distinguished heavenly gods, they carried out guerrilla warfare. While relying on his strong body, excellent lightning style enhancement, and his own bottomless chakra to fight hard. From time to time, giant trees fell down in the forest, and the sounds of bodies and weapons colliding could be heard from time to time. The two sides were fighting back and forth for a while, showing a deadlock. However, it was this stalemate that made Kagura more and more certain of his previous conjecture. The state of Golden Horn is indeed very wrong. He has a clear judgment on his own strength at this time. Although he has the strength of Jonin, he is far from a ninja of Golden Horn's level. And on the one hand, the combat strategy Jin Zhao used against everyone at the beginning was not in line with his character. According to the plot, Jin Zhao's character should be indifferent and impatient. This method of ambush Sarutobi Hiruzen by threatening students is more like what his younger brother Ginkaku would do. On the other hand, the absence of Ginkaku and their other 4 famous ninja tools is obviously problematic. The most important thing is the option given in the system to kill the Golden Horn. This shows that the system believes that these people have the possibility of killing Golden Horn. This also shows that Jin Zhao's strength at the moment is not as strong as he showed, so he used a strategy to end the battle quickly. At this time, Jin Zhao also felt depressed. After experiencing the battle between Tobirama and the 3rd generation Thunder Ninja this year, his body has reached a very bad state. Especially the pursuit of the 3rd generation Thunder Ninja. He still remembered that in that battle, his younger brother Yin Zhao was ambushed by that guy I, and he was shot through the heart and died on the spot. And he barely escaped after paying the price of losing 2 ninja tools. This time when I came to the vicinity of Konoha village, I was actually forced to come here because I was being chased along the way. But he didn't expect to meet Sarutobi Hiruzen and others here. He knew very well that he could not show his weakness at this time, so the next appearance, pursuit, and ambush were all strategies he had planned in advance. The purpose is to quickly kill these people in front of you. But he didn't expect that after knocking down Sarutobi, he would be held back by a kid. After repelling Kagura, who was attacking from the right again, his heart sank. No, if you continue to drag on, I behind you might catch up. Thinking of this, he took out the banana fan from his mouth. Although I don't have much chakra left now, I should be able to use it again. Evaluating in his mind, the veins on his right hand reappeared, apparently preparing to destroy the 5, Kagura, in front of him at once. However, just when he was about to wave his fan, the pair of Sharingan flashed before his eyes again. Just as he was about to wave the fan, his right hand holding the fan was hit by 2, Kagura, that flashed out, causing the direction of the fan to change. Tisk, these troublesome eyes. Seeing this, Jin Zhao, who had regained control of his body, quickly stopped inputting chakra into the fan. Just when he raised his head again, the 5, Kagura, stopped their next attack, and instead spread out, faintly surrounding him in the middle. The 5, Kagura, opened their mouths at the same time, and their tails stood up high behind them. A bead of light as bright as the sun gradually appeared. Jin Zhao, who is also in the tailed beast clothed state, naturally knows what this is, and is preparing to attack him with the tailed beast jade. But Jin Zhao was not surprised at this time, but he was happy. He knew the tailed beast jade very well, so he also knew the shortcomings of this move. That means the preparation time is too long. Without hesitation, he immediately rushed towards one of the Kagura. The huge banana fan had been put away at some point, and his right hand was raised into a hand knife. A layer of lightning appeared on the outside of the hand knife, like a real sword. Kagura didn't have any panic on his face when he saw the golden horn rushing towards him, but he immediately stopped gathering the tailed beast jade. Then he advanced instead of retreating, opened his arms towards the golden horn that was rushing toward him, and hugged him directly. Before Golden Horn showed a confused expression, the 4 Kagura who were standing around also stopped their movements at the same time, rushed up and hugged his hands and feet respectively. The Kagura holding his body looked up at him, and finally smiled. You don't really think that an 8-year-old kid like me can produce 5-tailed beast jade at the same time? My real killer move was ready from the start. Quote, hearing these words, Jin Zhao's eyes passed through the Kagura in front of him and looked at the top of a hill in the distance. At this time, there was a dazzling thunder light shining there, accompanied by a sound like the chirping of hundreds of birds. Did he just start preparing? No, judging from the momentum accumulated from the attack from a distance, it must have been going on for a while. I never noticed it before. This thought flashed through his mind, and Jin Zhao looked at Kagura on his chest in surprise. Kagura smiled slightly, helped him clear up his doubts and said, although my distinguished heavenly gods cannot change your will much, it can still make you ignore the lights and sounds in the distance temporarily. After hearing these words, Jin Zhao suddenly remembered the hundreds of Kagura and hundreds of birds that appeared at the beginning. Yes, with the scale of the previous battle between him and Hiruzen Sarutobi, how could there be so many birds in this forest? Before he could think any more, the momentum of the thunder in the distance had reached its peak. Suddenly, the thunder light turned into a bolt of lightning and rushed towards the golden horn in a straight line. That bolt of lightning directly destroyed all obstacles in front of it with an indomitable momentum. Jin Zhao, who secretly sighed in his heart, was trying to break away from Kagura's restraints, but the long-term battle finally showed its sequelae. The usual abundant chakra was completely gone, and Jin Zhao felt that his whole body was filled with a strange feeling of powerlessness. It seemed like a long time passed, and it seemed like only a moment. That thunder light finally arrived in front of Golden Horn. It was Kagura who held the lightning in her hand. His left hand is pressing on his right hand, and in his right palm is a ball of light composed of thunder and lightning. The light ball was surrounded by frightening lightning, and there was a sound like the chirping of 1,000 birds. Exactly lightning style. Chidori. At this time, the right hand had passed through Jin Zhao's heart and came out from behind his body. Golden Horn, fallen. Looking at the tiny arms that sank into his chest, Jin Zhao looked in disbelief. As a ninja, he was never afraid of death. But I never thought that one day I would die at the hands of a genin. Seeing Kagura so close at hand, the thought of dying together flashed through Jin Zhao's mind. However, just when he finally wanted to take action, a feeling of exhaustion came from inside. When did you start to feel this powerless? When Silverhorn died in front of his eyes? Or when Tobirama killed all the subordinates who were loyal to him? Maybe it was the moment when he and his brother decided to rebel from the village. Looking at Kagura's childish face, Jin Zhao sighed intermittently. Maybe, we are no longer suitable for this era. Quote. The legend of Kumogakure left only these last words until the end. As Jin Zhao closed his eyes, his strong body finally fell back weakly. Seeing Jin Zhao's body in front of him, Kagura realized at this moment that he had really killed Jin Zhao. His whole body relaxed, and Kagura sat down on the ground weakly, panting rapidly. Perhaps because he was still unable to control Chidori's power, or because Golden Horn's body was stronger than expected, Kagura's right hand was broken again. Kagura, who had broken away from the tailed beast clothed state, felt that every bone in her body was groaning. Blood and tears were constantly flowing from his eyes, and his head seemed to be about to explode in the next moment. But none of this could conceal his excitement at this time. I really succeeded. Lying on the ground with his hands stretched out, Kagura laughed wildly. All these battles were carefully planned by him. The Chidori I just used is the ninjutsu that was awarded after completing the B-level mission this time. Since he has just mastered this ninjutsu, he is now unable to conceal the light and sound when using Chidori. At the same time, the damage of this ninjutsu mainly depends on the speed and impact force, so the longer the impact distance, the greater its power. All of these require a long preparation time. So from the beginning, he used distinguished heavenly gods to make Golden Horn subconsciously ignore the abnormality caused by his use of Chidori in the distance. As the number of uses of distinguished heavenly gods increased, Kagura gradually understood the principle of ninjutsu. Although it is called the strongest genjutsu, Kagura feels that its core is not genjutsu. The most powerful thing about distinguished heavenly gods is using genjutsu to subtly change the target's will, thereby making the target take actions that are beneficial to itself. However, this change cannot violate the most fundamental will of the target. For example, when facing the attack of those ninjas at the beginning, Kagura could not use distinguished heavenly gods to make the enemy directly take out their weapons and commit suicide. Because the act of committing suicide goes against their most fundamental will. Similarly, if the target is stronger and has stronger willpower, then the change of will that Kagura can make will be smaller. For an opponent like Jin Zhao, it is the limit for him to ignore some abnormalities around him. If not, he could directly avoid this battle by using distinguished heavenly gods to make Golden Horn think that everyone is his companion. Fortunately, the final result told him that all his attempts were successful. Kagura, who was lying on the ground, suddenly thought of something and endured the discomfort in his body and stood up again. He first walked to the river and cleaned the blood on his right hand, and then walked back to where Tsunade and others were. After doing all this, he no longer forced himself, closed his eyes and fainted. After a long time, several figures finally arrived at the scene. Looking at the devastated battlefield in front of them, several people were stunned. Suddenly, a scream sounded. Quick, Sarutobi-sama is here. Several people quickly surrounded the person who made the noise. These people are none other than the Jonin from Konoha. The noise of their battle was so loud that even in Konoha village, the ground could be felt shaking. Without any hesitation, Konoha's higher-ups directly sent several Jonin to investigate. But they didn't expect that Sarutobi-sama, who was just out on a B-level mission, would be lying on the ground unconscious at this time. No, this is the Golden Horn. Not long after, Jin Zhao's body lying on the ground was also discovered. Several people looked at each other in surprise. It seemed that what happened here was far more serious than they imagined. This is no longer something they can participate in, and they must go back to the village immediately to report. Fortunately, just when everyone was about to leave, one of them, Jonin, thought about it and said, I remember that this time Sarutobi-sama went out with genin from Team 7, including Tsunade Haim. Search the area again to see if you can find them, even corpses. Quote. When Kagura opened his eyes, what he saw dimly was the ceiling with light tubes hanging from it. He groaned feebly and felt soreness in the muscles all over his body. After opening my eyes for a long time, my vision was still blurry, as if the whole world was covered with a layer of plastic wrap. It seems that the consequences of turning into a tailed beast and driving Sharingan at full power are greater than imagined. Sensing Kagura's movements, a clear female voice came from beside him. Are you awake? Kagura turned his head and looked over with those divine eyes. After a long time, as the focus slowly recovered, he finally saw clearly that the person speaking was Tsunade. At this time, Tsunade's hands were bandaged, but compared with herself lying on the bed, she didn't look too serious. Looking at Kagura's dazed look, Tsunade asked worriedly. What's wrong with you? How do you feel now? Looking at the delicate and worried face, Kagura was stunned for a moment, wondering why that face was so beautiful. He shook his head slowly and murmured in a daze. I'm fine. Well, it seems that according to the plot of the TV series one watched before, I should be drinking water at this time. Kagura, who had just woken up, obviously had not fully recovered her consciousness. For a moment, she thought that she was still in Blue Star, and subconsciously even said it in the TV series. Tsunade looked at Kagura in confusion, but even though she didn't know what a TV series was, she still understood the need to drink water. After being helped by Tsunade to sit up, Kagura finally came back to her senses after drinking a glass of water. He asked doubtfully, "This is where?" Taking the water glass and placing it on the table nearby, Tsunade replied. Don't worry, we are in the hospital in Konoha village now. As Tsunade explained, Kagura gradually understood what happened next. It has been 2 days since that day. The Konoha Jonin who came after hearing the news found everyone scattered everywhere and returned to the village with Golden Horn's body. Except for Kagura, everyone else woke up yesterday. Through Sarutobi Hiruzen's narration, Konoha's senior officials finally knew the whole story. At this time, faced with the third Raikage's request to exchange Golden Horn's corpse, Konoha's top brass were discussing the conditions that Kumogakure village needed to pay. Since Tsunade woke up yesterday, she has been staying beside the unconscious Kagura. After describing what happened in the past 2 days, although he was a little reluctant to leave, the doctor who came to check on the situation told Kagura to take a good rest. Tsunade had no choice but to leave the room unwillingly. It seems that Kagura's action of helping her resist Golden Horn's punch not only made Tsunade no longer angry, but even completely captured her heart. Recalling the affectionate look in Tsunade's eyes when she was just 8 years old, Kagura could only feel guilty in her heart. Lying in the ward that had regained its purity, Kagura finally had the opportunity to check on her condition. The doctor just said that it will take at least another week for him to be discharged from the hospital. As for the fracture in the right hand, it will take more time to recover. But this was not what Kagura was most concerned about. At this time, he couldn't wait to open the system interface. At this time, a completed prompt appeared under the task, successfully killed the Golden Horn. After much thought, Kagura did not immediately draw the reward for the task. Then, what surprised him even more was the growth of other attributes. At this time his attributes are Eye Technique, Double Magatama Sharingan, progress 86.3%. Physical Skills, 5th Gate, Gate of Limit, progress 32.1%. Chakra, Jonin level, progress 4.3%. Tailed Beast, 1 tail, fusion degree 43%. Compared to before setting off from the village, his attributes had undergone earth-shaking changes. Obviously, the pupil technique that has just evolved to the double Magatama has made a lot of progress, and it seems that the next step of the 3 Magatama is not far away. As for Taijutsu and Chakra, they have directly advanced 1 level, being promoted to the 5th Gate and Jonin level respectively. As for the Tailed Beast, perhaps because of the use of the Tailed Beast clothing, the fusion degree is much higher than before. Sure enough, only leapfrog combat is the best way to practice, but it is a bit wasteful. Just when Kagura was delighted that her strength had become stronger again, there was a knock on the door of the ward. Following Kagura's reply, the person outside the door walked in. The person coming was none other than Sarutobi Hiruzen. Compared with Tsunade, Sarutobi Hiruzen didn't seem to be too seriously injured and was still in his usual clothes. He walked to Kagura's bed, looked up and down before smiling and saying, "It seems that nothing serious is wrong with you." Kagura nodded in agreement. Sarutobi Hiruzen pulled out the chair beside him and sat down. There was a sudden silence between the two of them. It was Sarutobi Hiruzen who broke the silence first. He glanced at Kagura with a teasing look, and then smiled. Tsunade must have just left. I heard that she stayed by your bed all day yesterday. Hearing Tsunade's topic, Kagura also had a hint of embarrassment on her face, and could only answer hesitantly. Ah, yes, she has always cared about her companions. Quote. Yeah, but it seems that after waking up, she didn't even visit Orochimaru or Jiraiya. Just stay here with you. Quote. Sarutobi Hiruzen didn't seem to want to let Kagura go, so he continued. Perhaps he had been naive enough to think that Tsunade only had ordinary friendship with Kagura. But he is just a straight man, not a fool. Tsunade's behavior in the past 2 days clearly showed her interest in this boy. This is not good news for him who is about to take office as Hokage. Facing Sarutobi Hiruzen's questioning, the muscles on Kagura's face twitched slightly. Then he closed his eyes and stopped answering. Seeing Kagura's dishonest look, Hiruzen Sarutobi smiled, shook his head, and said again. Actually, I'm very happy. ? Hearing this, Kagura opened her eyes and looked over in confusion. What are you happy about? Happy Konoha's first pervert who seduces girls appears. Looking at Kagura's questioning eyes, Sarutobi Hiruzen explained. I was very happy that day when you stood in front of Tsunade without hesitation. You were excellent, and even in the Warring States period, your talents were extremely shining. But you are too good, so you never have the concept of companions. However, that day, when you were still brave enough to stand up for your companions in the face of the Golden Horn's attack, I was very pleased. Quote. Looking at Sarutobi Hiruzen's sincere eyes, Kagura pondered for a few seconds before Kaido. I didn't think much about it at the time, it was just a subconscious move. Hearing Kagura's words, the smile on Sarutobi Hiruzen's face became even wider. He smiled softly and said, That's right, only subconscious actions can reveal your true inner wishes. Having said this, he stood up and came to the window, looking towards the highest point of Konoha. There is the most famous symbol of Konoha village, the head statue representing the Hokage of the past. At this time, workers were busy up there, and the third avatar was slowly taking shape. If you look closely, you will see that it is the head of Hiruzen Sarutobi. Looking at the busy scene in the distance, Sarutobi Hiruzen said again. Do you know the origin of the name Konoha? Although she knew that Sarutobi Hiruzen couldn't see it, Kagura still nodded subconsciously and replied. I know, this is the name given by Uchiha Madara, the full name is Konoha Ninja Village. Wood refers to the Senju clan of the forest represented by Hashirama, the Senju who can use wood style. Yi refers to the Uchiha clan whose family crest is shaped like a fan leaf. Quote. Yes, the Uchiha clan has been a very important member of Konoha village since its founding. Because of this, Uchiha has always played an important role as the village guard. Quote. Having said this, Sarutobi Hiruzen turned to look at Kagura and continued. Indeed, because of Uchiha Madara, second generation Tobirama-sama has always been wary of your clan. And now Danzo seems to have inherited this idea and has always had some opinions about you. But I am different, I believe in all my companions in the village. Quote. At this time, a breeze blew through the window, and several fallen leaves were blown off the trees, dancing with the accompaniment of the wind. Looking at the dancing leaves, Sarutobi Hiruzen seemed to have a gleam of fire in his eyes. He said in a sentimental tone, Kagura, I believe you. Just like how Lord Madashira believed in the Uchiha clan back then. It is precisely because of the bonds of companions that Konoha is what it is today. Quote. Faced with everything he said, Kagura just remained silent. Fortunately, at this moment, the knock on the door sounded again. The two teenagers stretched their heads and looked inside. It was Orochimaru and Jiraiya. Seeing the sneaky looks of the two people, Kagura couldn't help but feel a warmth flowing through her heart. Sarutobi Hiruzen couldn't help laughing when he saw this, pointed at them and looked at Kagura and said. Isn't this the bond that belongs to you? Everyone left, and after expressing their visit, Jiraiya and Orochimaru followed Sarutobi-sensei. Kagura was lost in thought. He didn't ask how Jin Zhao died in the end. He said this silently. Yes, The moment she saw Sarutobi Hiruzen, Kagura began to think about how to explain the cause of Golden Horn's death. Yes, he didn't want others to know that he was the one who killed Golden Horn. Otherwise, after knocking down Jin Zhao, he would not have gone out of his way to clean up the blood, but would have dragged himself away from the scene. But these may confuse those who come later, but they cannot hide it from Sarutobi Hiruzen, who has experienced live battles. Make a name for yourself. This is not what he is pursuing. He only knows that the more famous he is, the faster he will die. If the hidden Uchiha Madara knew, there was an 8-year-old member of the Uchiha clan who could kill a character like Golden Horn. Then I will definitely be targeted, maybe I will become Obito's replacement. None of this is what Kagura wants. At this time, he just wants to survive until he has enough strength to survive. In fact, when she learned from Tsunade that teacher Sarutobi admitted that Golden Horn was killed by him, Kagura vaguely sensed Sarutobi Hiruzen's intention to protect her. This seems to be some kind of tacit understanding between master and disciple. As for you saying it was because Hiruzen Sarutobi wanted to take the credit. Brother, he is going to be a Hokage, does he care about this kind of credit? But Kagura didn't expect that after Hiruzen Sarutobi came over, he didn't mention a word about the Golden Horn. He just expressed kindness to himself and left. Taking a deep breath, Kagura turned her head and looked out the window. Looking at the leaves slowly falling in the air, he murmured. The bond between companions. Time flies, 3 days have passed. Maybe it's because he has been quenched by the power of the tailed beast in his body, or maybe it's because Kagura's body is really gifted. The doctor originally judged that it would take a week to recover from the injury, but Kagura recovered in just 3 days. At this time, except for his right hand which was still bandaged, there was no trace of any injury on his body. Facing the doctor's sighs and the dangerous eyes that seemed to want to pull her away for a biopsy, Kagura left the hospital as if she was running away. Putting on his formal clothes solemnly, he saw Tsunade and the other 3 who had been waiting for a long time at the entrance of the hospital. Different from usual, the 3 people also put on their best formal clothes and stood there today. Arriving in front of everyone, Kagura showed a smile, raised his head slightly forward and said, "Let's go." At this time, Konoha village was more lively than usual, and the streets were even decorated with decorations that would only be put up during festivals. Everyone solemnly put on their best clothes and poured into the street. Because today is the day when Sarutobi Hiruzen officially takes office as the 3rd Hokage. On the roof of the Hokage building, Sarutobi Hiruzen was already standing at the highest point. Today, he is wearing a white Hokage robe with the 3 characters, 3rd generation, written on the back, a red ninja suit lining and a Hokage hat on his head. Behind him, the Hokage stone statue representing him has been sculpted. With his appearance, the crowd gathered below burst into thunderous celebrations. Hokage is not only a symbol of strength, but also the spiritual sustenance of people in the village. 2nd generation. During the period after Senju Tobarama's unexpected death, the village was filled with a feeling of worry. However, today, when they saw the new Hokage above, the people's confidence returned again. Looking at the admired figure above, Jiraiya showed an excited smile on his face. Hokage, I can definitely become a Hokage in the future. No, you have no chance. The next generation of Hokage belongs to the man known as the fastest. Quote. Hearing Jiraiya's whisper, Kagura complained silently in her heart. However, feeling the enthusiasm of the people around him, his mood couldn't help but rise at this time. For the first time, the emotion called longing appeared in the eyes looking at that figure. Tsunade, who was looking up with the same excitement, suddenly asked a question. Sarutobi sensei has officially become Hokage, so he will definitely not be able to continue to be our leader in the future. Then who will be our leading teacher in the future? Hearing this, the other 3 people looked startled. That's right, who will take over as Sarutobi sensei and lead the team from now on? Just then, a strange voice came from behind them. Kaido. I will be your teacher from now on. I will be your teacher from now on. A low-pitched male voice sounded from behind them. Everyone turned around and looked back when they heard the sound. Unexpectedly, a young man with a rather gloomy temperament stood behind them. Although the man had an X-shaped scar on his chin, it still couldn't hide his handsome appearance. It's just that the hazy temperament makes people a little uncomfortable. When Kagura saw the person in front of him, although his expression was as usual, he was already filled with surprise. Although it was the first time they met, he already recognized the identity of the person in front of him. It was Danzo, the leader of the Root organization who had sent people to monitor him before. Who will be the leading teacher after Class 7? After hearing the content of Danzo's words clearly, Kagura felt that her future life seemed to have been cast into a shadow. Who is Danzo? If there really is a villain in Konoha, then Danzo must be the first choice. Even compared to Orochimaru, Danzo makes many Hokage fans feel angry. Perhaps he has always insisted on his own justice, but there is no doubt that many tragedies in the entire plot happened because of him. Even if the Uchiha genocide incident was inseparable from his contribution, Orochimaru's deterioration also had his factor. In order to research the cells of the first-generation Hokage Senju Hashirama, an artificial human with the Hashira chakra was obtained. It was he who inspired Orochimaru to plunder humans from surrounding villages and come back for experiments. It can be said that Orochimaru's earliest human experiments were carried out precisely because of his support. Thinking of this, Kagura couldn't help but look at the innocent-looking Orochimaru next to her. Well, I will definitely be able to change your destiny this time. Unlike Kagura, who was worried, after seeing Danzo, Tsunade and the other three were slightly startled, but they all smiled in unison. Tsunade gave a rare respectful greeting. Lord Danzo. Naturally, Danzo and the others also knew about it. As one of the 6 guards of the second-generation Medobarama, Danzo at this time had not yet retreated behind the scenes, and he also had a high reputation in Konoha. Although it would be better to have Sarutobi-sensei lead the team, it doesn't seem like a bad thing if he is replaced. Ignoring the gazes of others, Danzo kept staring at Kagura silently, observing his reaction. But the calm Kagura didn't show much expression. Seeing this, Danzo spoke again. Speaking of which, you did a great job in that battle a few days ago. Hearing Danzo's praise, Jiraiya, Orochimaru and others lowered their heads in guilt. In that battle, they made no contribution at all. It can be said that they quit as soon as the war started. At least Kagura managed to fight off Golden Horn a few times, but the others were almost crushed and knocked down. Seeing everyone's expressions, it seemed that they were not good at making similar expressions. Danzo reluctantly showed a smile and said, "You don't need to be ashamed. It is normal to lose in the face of a powerful enemy. What matters is not now, but future growth." Quote. After saying this, he looked at Kagura again and said as if pointing. Speaking of which, we also inspected the scene in Jin Zhao's body afterwards. Judging from the scene, Golden Horn should have been killed by someone using a lightning-style ninjutsu that accelerated over a long distance. But the strange thing is that the size of the wound on his chest is smaller than we imagined. Quote. Having said this, his eyes flashed when he looked at Kagura, and then he continued. It's like the size of a child's hand. Facing Danzo's aggressive gaze, Kagura said without changing his expression. Well, it's really strange. But I'm sorry, a few of us fainted at the beginning and didn't know what kind of ninjutsu it was. I think you should ask Master Hokage directly about this question. After all, he killed the enemy with his own hands. I don't think he would mind explaining the situation to you. Quote. Looking at the impeccable Kagura, Danzo nodded slightly and stopped talking. He just looked up at Sarutobi Hiruzen above again. Vaguely feeling that something was wrong in the atmosphere, the other three looked at the two of them doubtfully. But because they didn't know the whole story, they could only remain silent in the end. The Hokage's inauguration ceremony did not last long. After Sarutobi Hiruzen gave a speech in front of everyone, the carnival came to an end. The crowd gradually dispersed, and after Danzo told everyone the place and time for tomorrow's gathering, he left. Afterwards, Jiraiya also said goodbye to everyone. Speaking of which, he has been a little busy since he was discharged from the hospital. Later, after Tsunade explained, Kagura found out that he was busy organizing books. Speaking of Jiraiya's luck, he was quite lucky. Before he was attacked by Golden Horn, he had put the books he had brought from the country of Whirlpool under the tree. Then that battle, which could be described as devastating, perfectly avoided the tree where he kept his books. After being discharged from the hospital the day before yesterday, he returned to the scene immediately and retrieved his precious books. So these 2 days he has been busy recording and classifying those books. Looking at Jiraiya's figure in the distance, Tsunade curled her lips and muttered. I always feel that Jiraiya has changed a lot since graduation. Orochimaru on the side responded gently. Jiraiya has found something he likes, and we should be happy for him. In the end, the three of them, who had nothing to do, chose to hang out on the street together. While walking, Tsunade's eyes lit up when she saw a queue not far away. That is a new fruit drink recently released in the village. Because of its unique flavor, it is very popular among young people, and there is always a long queue in front of the store. Excitedly, she asked her two companions, and after receiving negative answers from Kagura and Orochimaru, Tsunade planned to buy one alone. Looking at Tsunade lining up in the distance, Kagura and Orochimaru sat on a bench on the street and waited. Not long after sitting down, Orochimaru suddenly asked, Kagura, during that battle, were you really knocked out? Hearing this, Kagura turned to look at Orochimaru aside, and saw his serious eyes. Obviously, unlike the other two who were very nervous, the smart Orochimaru seemed to have deduced some facts from Danzo's words just now. Kagura pondered for a while, and then chose to confess. No, not really, but unlike what you might think, I am not the main force in the battle, it is mainly due to Sarutobi-sensei. At most I was lucky enough to ambush a wave of people. Quote. Orochimaru was slightly startled when he heard Kagura's honest words. He didn't expect Kagura to tell him the truth directly. In fact, this was not just a whim of Kagura or something he wanted to show off to his companions. It was a choice he made after thinking about it. After that battle, except for Orochimaru, Tsunade and Jiraiya were a little depressed emotionally. Known as geniuses, although they were suppressed by Kagura along the way, they actually did not encounter much setbacks. But in this battle, the opponent defeated them with just one blow, which was actually a big blow to them. In such a mood, now that Danzo has come to Orochimaru again, Kagura can't help but start to worry about Orochimaru's darkening in advance. Thinking of all this, he decided to confess to Orochimaru. After all, with Orochimaru's wisdom, even if he doesn't confess, he will easily be aware of the truth in the future. Will he have any negative emotions at that time because of his concealment? As a Blue Star person who has watched many bloody dramas, Kagura feels that this is a very possible development. After digesting the meaning of Kagura's words, Orochimaru lowered his head and thought for a moment. Then he looked up at Kagura as if he had made up his mind and said, Kagura, can you teach me how to practice? ? Kagura was stunned when he heard this. He didn't expect Orochimaru, who was proud in his heart, to make such a request to him. After shaking his head slightly, he said to Orochimaru, Orochimaru, you don't actually need to be in such a hurry. It's not that I don't want to, it's that my way is not suitable for you. I think you can refer to Jiraiya's experience and you will definitely be able to find your own opportunities. Quote. It wasn't that he was being perfunctory with Orochimaru. Although there is no specific explanation in the plot, Kagura knows that there is a snake immortal in a fairyland similar to Mount Myoboku in this world. In fact, the Sannin of Konoha are the lucky ones in the three heavenly paradises. Although Kagura didn't know how Orochimaru finally entered the blessed land belonging to snakes, it was not difficult to guess based on Jiraiya's experience. Hearing Kagura's almost comforting words, Orochimaru did not feel disappointed, but tilted his head thoughtfully. Looking at Orochimaru who was thinking, Kagura thought for a while and said again. Orochimaru, are you still continuing your research on ninjutsu? Upon hearing the word, ninjutsu, Orochimaru's eyes suddenly lit up. He nodded hurriedly, and then looked at Kagura expectantly, as if waiting for him to say something. After hesitating for a while, Kagura said something that shocked Orochimaru. Have you ever considered human experimentation? Have you ever considered human experimentation? As soon as Kagura said this, Orochimaru's face suddenly turned pale. Well, although his face was already very white, Kagura could clearly see that his face was a bit whiter. As if breaking some taboos in his heart, Orochimaru trembled unconsciously and said, do you know what you're talking about? Human experimentation is taboo throughout the shinobi world. Quote. Facing Orochimaru's question, Kagura shrugged indifferently and answered calmly. I know, but there are still many people doing similar things, right? None of us can deny this. Quote, upon hearing this, Orochimaru also fell silent as a sign of acquiescence. In fact, in this world, using human bodies to experiment with ninjutsu is not a big deal. The eye is transplanted to obtain the pupil technique, and the tailed beast is sealed into the human body to create the so-called Jinchuriki. In fact, if you look at it from a broader perspective, all countries are conducting human experiments overtly or covertly. Even Konoha, led by 3rd Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, is no exception. In the original plot, he shouted heartache about Orochimaru's cruelty while acquiescing to everything Danzo did. Yamato, which was produced after studying intercolumn cells, and the many eyes that were collected by Danzo after the Uchiha were exterminated. Didn't these Sarutobi Hiruzen also silently admit it? However, Kagura at this moment is not to guide Orochimaru to go dark, but to guide him in the right direction. He continued, of course, I'm not saying I support capturing civilians for human experimentation. I think every research can be divided into stages. When the initial risk is high, we can use mice or other animals to conduct experiments and analyze the data. After all, like humans, these creatures also have chakra in their bodies. Only after we get some concrete data that it can reduce the risk of death can we start considering human trials. Quote, after saying this, Kagura paused and seemed to collect his thoughts before saying, as for human trials, we can use some death row prisoners for the initial stage. Of course, we can adjust the intensity and control the risk to a range where people will not die easily at the beginning. After all, death row prisoners are also human beings, and we cannot treat human life lightly. Then we will increase the intensity step by step to get the data we want. In this series of experiments, we need to record comparisons and data, analyze the reasons for each failure or success, and then conduct the next experiment. Through further experiments and data analysis, after controlling the risk to a range that we feel we can bear, we will then recruit volunteers for the experiment. In this era, in order to gain strength, I believe there will still be many volunteers. Quote, after saying this long sentence in one breath, Kagura licked the corners of her mouth, waiting for Orochimaru's reaction. With Kagura's words, Orochimaru's eyes became brighter and brighter, and there was an obvious flush on his face with excitement. He excitedly held Kagura's hands and said with disbelief, Kagura, you are indeed a genius. Yes, you are right, we can control the preliminary materials of the experiment and then develop it into a less harmful human experiment step by step. Well, although it feels like the experimental process may be a bit slow, if we can get the support of the village, it will be a help. I'm going to see you tomorrow. No, I need to sort out my thoughts before I go. As the voice became lower and lower, Orochimaru seemed to think of the future in his dreams, and the flush of excitement on his face became more and more obvious. Seeing Orochimaru's reaction, Kagura couldn't help but nodded happily. In fact, in his opinion, Orochimaru's character is no different from those researchers on Blue Star who focus on scientific research. For such people, the key is whether they can be guided to the right path. In fact, the reason why Orochimaru was self-centered and didn't trust his teammates in the early stage was because he didn't want those around him to get hurt. In this nature, Kagura is confident that he will embark on a relatively bright future. However, at this time, a surprised voice interrupted his contemplation. What are you doing? The person who spoke was Tsunade, who came back from queuing up. She looked at the two of them in surprise, holding 2 drinks in her hands. Looks like she ended up buying a drink for Kagura. But at this time, her eyes moved back and forth between Orochimaru and Kagura, and finally stopped at Orochimaru's hands holding Kagura. Following Tsunade's gaze, Kagura finally came back to observe the postures of the two of them. The two of them clasped their hands, and Orochimaru was looking at him with a flushed face, muttering some words in his mouth. As Tsunade's face became paler, Kagura finally realized that there was indeed something wrong with their posture at this time. He quickly took his hand out and explained to Tsunade. Tsunade, it's not what you think. But it was obvious that Tsunade didn't listen, as she looked at the two of them with blank eyes. Suddenly a chill ran through her body. She looked at Kagura with disgust and said, I thought you liked this. No, what exactly did you misunderstand? Sister, that's Orochimaru, a man. Wait, if it is, Ant Snake, who learns reincarnation in the future, it seems not impossible. What on earth was I thinking? Orochimaru, who was wandering in his mind at this time, finally came back to his senses. He looked at Tsunade, who came back, and his face turned even redder. He suddenly stood up and bowed to Kagura and said, Kagura-kun, I will always remember what you just said to me. Thank you. After saying that, without waiting for Kagura to say anything, he decisively turned around and left. Looking at Orochimaru walking away and the pale-faced Tsunade beside him, several black lines appeared on Kagura's head. Thank you, sir. No, you're blushing like crazy. Besides, what is the meaning of suddenly using honorifics to me, and what are the meanings of that misleading sentence? What I said to you, you should explain clearly on the spot. Looking at Tsunade, who had tears in her eyes in front of her, Kagura felt dizzy. Destroy it, quickly. Fortunately, later in Kagura's explanation, Tsunade gradually understood the content of the conversation between the two. Even so, there was still a hint of doubt in Tsunade's eyes when she looked at Kagura. Kagura also shook her head and smiled bitterly, and could only ignore it for the time being. The passage of time is not affected by human will. 2 months have passed since Hiruzen Sarutobi took office as Hokage. 1 week after being discharged from the hospital, the bandage on Kagura's hand was removed. The addition of Danzo didn't seem to change the rhythm of Team 7. In fact, nothing has changed in their daily lives. To be fair, as a team mentor, Danzo is indeed very responsible. To be a strong contender for the third Hokage, Danzo does have something of his own. The team's cooperative offensive formation, tactics and ninjutsu application in different environments, how to find cover in different environments, etc. Danzo did not hide his secrets, but taught his experience to everyone without reservation. During this period of time, the 4 of them were like sponges, constantly absorbing these experiences. If it weren't for the vigilance in Danzo's eyes every time he looked at her, Kagura would have almost thought that this old fool was a good person. Kagura believes that the calmer Danzo is now, the more complicated the conspiracy behind it is. But for a genin, the most missions they can take on are C-level missions. Even most of the time, they can only perform D-level tasks. So in the past 2 months, they have basically been active in the village. But during this time, the other 3 have changed a lot. Under Kagura's subtle hint, Orochimaru and Tsunade finally encountered their own opportunity. Like Jiraiya, they also found the paradise behind their respective summons. Recently, every time Tsunade completed a mission, she would start working hard to learn healing techniques. In order to show the progress of her healing skills, she even beat Jiraiya severely and then used healing skills to cure him. After going back and forth like this several times, Jiraiya had a psychological shadow. After each disbandment, Jiraiya seemed to be running away from Tsunade, which made Tsunade angry. As for Orochimaru, to use Jiraiya's words to describe it, this guy feels more and more like a snake. Perhaps the characteristic of Snake Immortal is the changes in physical skills. Orochimaru is now like another hot-blooded manga protagonist that Kagura has seen in his previous life. He can now extend any part of his body at will. When he saw Orochimaru using this skill for the first time, Kagura belatedly realized that this was simply a magical skill that men dream of. But when Tsunade saw Orochimaru stretching his head over more than 10 meters away, she only felt a sense of fear. Once again, a simple D-level task was completed. After Danzo announced that he was disbanded on the spot, Kagura walked directly towards home. Seeing this, Tsunade immediately followed him and said, Kagura, the 3 of us have agreed to go to your house for a gathering today. Are you free? Looking back and seeing the expectant eyes of her 3 companions, Kagura shook her head. He refused in a slightly heavy tone. I'm sorry, there's something going on today and I really can't leave. Next time. Quote. After saying that, he left without looking back. This is not to deal with them, Kagura does have something very important to do today. Because today he is going to attend a very important funeral. After returning home and changing into a black formal suit, Kagura stood at the door with a solemn expression. At this time, Konoha has entered winter. Although it is still afternoon, there are dark clouds in the sky. Before I even walked out of the house, snowflakes slowly started to fall in the sky. Kagura has never been able to figure out which location on the blue star this corresponds to. Summer is obviously long and hot, but it also snows in winter. Putting his hands to his mouth and taking a breath of hot air, he took out a black umbrella next to the door and held it up. Under the dark clouds, the crystal snowflakes are getting bigger and bigger, adding a bit of depression. After only 10 minutes of walking, he arrived at his destination. This is a morning hall. When the family members outside saw Kagura arriving, they neatly bowed to the visitor. Kagura put away her umbrella and returned the gesture, then walked in slowly. Staring blankly at the black and white scene in the middle of the morning hall, Kagura felt sad for the first time since time travel. The person in the photo is Uchiha Kagami, the person who has been taking care of him. Perhaps it was because he heard the news of Jin Zhao Yin Zhao's death that he, who was already weak after being seriously injured the previous year, could not survive this year. Looking at that familiar face, Kagura recalled every bit of the past. In the first few days after traveling, it was either due to fear of changes in the environment or worries about one's own future. Kagura almost locked herself in her room during those few days. Finally, it was Uchiha Kagami who rushed in and took out himself, who almost fainted from hunger. When he finally accepted the facts and started to practice hard, it was Jing who taught him how to practice. Kagami is like an outlier among the Uchiha clan. He is not as proud as other clan members. Instead, he is like a sun, warming the people around him. So even though Kagura consciously stayed away from Uchiha's people, she became a unique friend with him. Bowing respectfully forward 3 times, Kagura looked at the family members beside him. Mirror's wife was wearing a unique Japanese white dress, her eyes were a little red and swollen, and she looked like she had just cried. Beside her, a little boy of only 3 or 4 years old knelt beside her. Looking at the little boy, he knew that this was Kagami's son, the father of Uchiha Shisui, the original owner of distinguished heavenly gods ninjutsu. After bowing to the mother and son, Kagura left here. After walking out of the morning hall, looking at the dark sky, Kagura took a deep breath. Only then did he feel that he began to integrate into this world, feeling the joys and sorrows that these characters in comics brought to him. He shook his head, as if trying to drive out the sadness in his mind. Kagura once again held up her umbrella and walked towards home. But as soon as he walked outside the door, he unexpectedly found that the lights in the house had been turned on. Did I not turn off the lights when I went out? After muttering to himself in confusion, Kagura opened the door. Happy birthday. As soon as he walked in the door, as the voice of celebration sounded, a ribbon rain broke out in front of him. After sorting out the debris on his head, he looked blankly at the 3 familiar people. It is the companions of Team 7, Tsunade, Jiraiya and Orochimaru. He asked doubtfully, "How did you come into my house, and what's your birthday?" Tsunade replied with a smile on her face. "Oh, you didn't lock the door when you went out, we came in directly. Of course we are celebrating your 9th birthday. My birthday." This was the first time Kagura knew the date of her birthday. There was nothing he could do. When he was told to travel through time, the parents of this body would have already passed away. He instinctively rejects other tribesmen, and the only one close to him, Uchiha Kagami, doesn't know when his birthday is. So since he time traveled, he sadly has not had a birthday. As time went by, he also forgot his correct birthday. This time, it was because Tsunade had written down his information when she was in school that she knew the date of his birthday. So starting yesterday, she joined forces with Orochimaru and Jiraiya to prepare a surprise for him. But she didn't expect Kagura to be so disrespectful to her today. After rejecting the offer, she didn't give them a chance to talk and just left. Tsunade, who was unwilling to give up, naturally would not give up, and still came to Kagura's house with the things she had prepared. Fortunately, Kagura forgot to lock the door when she went out today because of the snow, otherwise Tsunade's original plan was to violently tear down the door. Looking at the 3 companions with smiles on their faces, and a table full of delicious food and cakes behind them, a smile slowly appeared on Kagura's blank face. He looked at the 3 of them sincerely and said, thank you for everything you have prepared for me." Upon hearing this, Tsunade smiled happily, took a step forward, held his hand, and walked behind her. As he walked, he said, "Come, blow out the candles first, and then try the food." We bought these with the rewards we received from completing tasks, and we waited in line for a long time to buy them. Quote, "Obviously, the food is all my money." "What do you mean? I didn't buy the cake." Amidst the noise of everyone, Kagura looked at the cake filled with candles in front of her and blew out the candles hard. Looking at the joyful eyes of his companions, a warm current seemed to surge in his heart. "Mr. Mirror, it seems that I have a group of very good companions." The time at the party always passed very quickly, and the three people left after eating and drinking. Looking at the room that had been cleaned and seemed a little empty, Kagura didn't feel as lonely as before. Looking at the remaining piece of cake in front of him, he was thinking about other things. Relying on his ability to know the plot well, maybe he can change the tragic fate of these three people. Thinking of this, a trace of determination flashed in his eyes. But if you want to change your destiny, the most important thing is to rely on your own strength. Thinking of this, he summoned the one tail in his body. After 2 months, he has successfully increased one tail's cultivation progress from 43% to 56%. When the progress exceeded 50%, he felt that he could summon the tailed beast in his body out of his body. Looking at one tail Shukaku, who was as round as a pet dog in front of her, Kagura smiled, pushed the remaining piece of cake over and said, "Come on, try this cake, I left it especially for you." The pure white one-tail howled with joy, then lay down next to the cake and started to eat it. Although the cute creature in front of me is completely different from the ferocious Shukaku in my impression. There is no evil chakra, no cruelty that is ready to destroy everything. The one tail that came out of his body was like a pure white little angel. If it could be taken out, it would probably win the favor of many girls. But even so, Kagura still only dared to let it out when she was alone. No way, its appearance is still the same as one tail. And the abundant chakra is difficult to avoid being noticed by people like Danzo. After feeding the cake, Kagura played with it for a while before taking it back into her body. After standing up and stretching, Kagura began to make the bed and prepare to fall asleep. There is no way, in this place without much entertainment, he has long developed the habit of going to bed early and getting up early. Late at night, Kagura, who was lying on the bed, suddenly opened her eyes. The eyes changed rapidly, directly transforming into the form of Sharingan. He did not get up immediately, but looked at the window warily. Suddenly, a voice sounded outside the window. "Don't be nervous, it's me." However, upon hearing this familiar voice, Kagura, who was originally just wary, began to become nervous. Because he recognized the owner of that voice, it was their leading teacher, Danzo. Seeing no response from the room, Danzo continued without paying attention. "Kagura, get up immediately and get ready. They will gather at the village gate after 15 minutes. This is an emergency, and what we are going to carry out this time is an A-level mission." A-level mission. When he heard these 4 words, Kagura's heart trembled. Without waiting for Kagura in the room to respond, Danzo left after saying these words. After noticing his departure, Kagura slowly stood up from the bed. After thinking for a moment, he started to pack his luggage. 10 minutes later, Kagura was hiding in a big tree, squinting his eyes to observe the situation at the gate of Konoha village. When he saw 3 familiar figures arriving, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. You can't blame him for being too cautious. Who is Danzo after all? If Kagura doesn't be as careful as possible, Kagura is afraid that one day she will die without knowing why. When Danzo informs you to gather somewhere late at night, Kagura's first thought is whether there will be an ambush there. However, when he saw the other 3 people from Class 7 also arriving at the scene, he knew that he was really overthinking this time. After all, even Danzo cannot kill people in the village calmly in front of others. What's more, there is Tsunade with a special background. After seeing the 3 people, Kagura also walked towards them. Without waiting much, Danzo appeared in front of everyone less than a minute after the 4 people gathered. He looked around, looked at the 4 people who were ready, nodded and said, "Very well, time is urgent, let's go first. I'll tell you the specific mission content while I'm on my way." Quote, in the dark forest, several black spots kept jumping between the big trees. They were the people of the 7th group who were on their way. Kagura and the others also learned the specific mission content from Danzo during this time. To put it simply, the cause of this mission is that the forbidden sealing technique was stolen. Just a few hours ago, the sealed book kept in the Hokage building was confirmed to have been stolen. Through on-site inspections and clue searches, Konoha senior officials determined that it was stolen by spies from other countries. And just an hour later, it was discovered that the thief was a Chunin named Shotafuda who worked at Hokage school. After searching the house where he lived and the entire theft process, Anbu had reason to believe that he was a spy from Sunagakur village. This operation exposed almost all the spies of Sunagakur village in Konoha. In addition to the obvious one, Shotafuda, there were also several hidden secrets that had been hidden for a long time. Through traces on the scene in ninjutsu, it was confirmed that this group of people was fleeing to the west. Judging from the route, they should want to enter Sunagakur village through the Land of Rain. After confirming these situations and after a high-level meeting, the A-level mission was temporarily issued. At the same time, Anbu and several teams were activated to capture Shotafuda and others. Sealed book. Kagura recalled some information from the book in her memory. To put it simply, this sealed book records all the forbidden techniques created by Konoha so far. Of course, so far, this book can also be said to be second-generation Senju Tobarama's work. In fact, many of the famous so-called forbidden arts in the Hokage were created by this second generation. Whether it's the multiple shadow clone technique that Kagura learned, or the flying thunder god technique known as the Golden Flash, Namikaze Minato. Even in the Fourth Ninja War, the villain summoned the filth reincarnation used by many predecessors. The creator of these famous ninjutsu is Senju Tobarama. It can be said that most of the ninjutsu created by this man in his life are classified as forbidden techniques. From this point of view, we can understand the reaction of Konoha's top brass after the book was stolen. Moreover, the sealed book also appeared in the original plot, and it was the one stolen by the protagonist Naruto in the first place. Speaking of such an important book, shouldn't I read it carefully? Are all the guards at the Hokage building free of charge? Being stolen either by a child or by a mere Chunin, what's the difference between this and being defenseless? Silently complaining in his heart, Kagura had a bigger question in his heart. Why didn't the system issue a task to itself this time? Of course, it doesn't mean that there must be a mission every time you do B level or above. But the last time I accepted a B-level mission for the first time, the system released the mission simultaneously. At least it can be inferred that when accepting a B-level or higher mission for the first time, a system reaction should be triggered. But this is obviously the first time he has accepted an A-level mission, so why does the system not respond? In confusion, he couldn't help but look at the back of Dian Zhang in front of him, always feeling that there was something fishy behind this incident. Obviously, since the thief dared to act, he must have been prepared. They chased along the route for a whole day, but still did not see the target. Taking a piece of paper from a ninja dog, Danzo opened it and looked at it. He pondered for a moment before speaking. According to valid information, Shotafuda has entered the Kingdom of Rain. But the good news is that the team starting in front should be able to get in front of the goal. We have to speed up the pace next, at least to be able to support the team in front. Quote. Seeing everyone nodding to him, the team, which had just rested for a quarter of an hour, set off again. One day later, in the country of Rain. It was raining lightly on the vast plain, and 5 figures were moving quickly on the wet land. It was Kagura and his team who were chasing the target. After running at high speed for 2 days and 2 nights, they finally arrived from the Kingdom of Fire to the Kingdom of Rain. And this place is worthy of the name of the Land of Rain. As soon as we entered this land, the originally sunny sky suddenly turned gloomy. After continuing to move forward for a while, drizzle began to fall from the sky, completely violating the laws of physics. After stepping through another puddle, Kagura put her arms behind her and tried her best to keep up with Danzo in front. Even for him, after running non-stop for 2 days, his physical strength seemed to be at its lowest. Jiraiya, who was at the very back, had a painful expression on his face. Fortunately, Danzo didn't always speed up. He seemed to be able to adjust his speed according to their limits. So the 4 people behind could always continue to follow with a feeling that they could keep up. Danzo at the front stepped across a pond again, his face suddenly changed, and a scream sounded from his mouth. Hearing this scream, Kagura and others immediately stopped. Sure enough, following Danzo's warning, dozens of ninjas appeared in the puddles around them. These ninjas all wore white tights similar to diving suits, with huge respirators and eye masks covering their facial features. This is the typical attire of a ninja from the land of rain. Looking up and looking around, Danzo said in a deep voice. What do you guys in Yuyin village mean? Are you trying to make an enemy of our Konoha village? The ninjas from Yuyin village did not answer his question, but took out their weapons to express their positions. Seeing this scene, a hint of gloom flashed in Danzo's eyes. He made a fist with his right hand and raised it above his head. Seeing this, Kagura and others also took out the kunai from their waists. Because that gesture was meant to remind everyone to accept the challenge. As Danzo's figure suddenly disappeared, the battle was about to break out. As a ninja of the same level as Sarutobi Hiruzen, Danzo's combat ability is naturally not bad. Although in the animation plot, it feels like he will only fight through the Sharingan he obtained. But that is Danzo in his old age after all, and there is a suspicion that the author specially sacrificed it to kill Sasuke in the plot. In fact, as the leader of the Root organization, Danzo is one of the best in the ninjutsu world now, both in taijutsu and ninjutsu. With every appearance of his figure, an enemy will fall. Just a few minutes later, more than a dozen corpses appeared in front of them. As for the Kagura Four, although they are not as exaggerated as Danzo. But with the cooperation of the four people, they also defeated the remaining enemies. This was the result of their defeat using purely physical skills. In fact, it was not that Kagura and others were deliberately hiding their clumsiness, but that the continuous rush had consumed most of their chakra. But until now they have not officially encountered the enemy, so it is the wisest choice to save the remaining chakra as much as possible. Looking at the enemy lying on the ground, Danzo's expression became more solemn. Because the appearance of these people means that Yuyin village has intervened in this incident, this chase has become more dangerous than imagined. Different from the 5 major countries, small countries like the Rain country do not have a firm stance to begin with. Especially the ninjas of Yuyin village. In this era, Yuyin village is more like a mercenary. As long as anyone is willing to pay, they are willing to work for anyone. So although he thought it was a bit troublesome, Danzo was actually not too surprised by the participation of a Megakure village in the war. Kagura on the side also looked at the fallen enemy, and then at the dark cloud-covered sky in the distance. It seems that this mission is more dangerous than imagined. In an abandoned hut, Danzo and everyone in Team 7 were taking a break around the fire. In fact, on the morning of Kagura's departure, Konoha sent a diplomatic appeal to Sunagakure village. The newly appointed 3rd Hokage angrily criticized Sunagakure village for infiltrating spies into Konoha village. Of course, politicians are the same no matter where they are. In the face of Konoha's wrath, Sunagakure expressed its regret that you had lost important items. But there is absolutely no such thing as the espionage matter that you are protesting against. Yes, you know it was my man who stole, and that man is fleeing towards us. But doing it is one thing. From an official standpoint, it cannot be acknowledged even to death. But the senior officials of Sunagakure village did not expect that it was their words that Sarutobi Hiruzen was waiting for. Shortly after Sunagakure village responded, the Jonin of Konoha set off collectively and teleported directly to the border between the land of rain and the land of sand through ninjutsu. Since you don't admit that they are your people, then I should just send people to guard the border. Moreover, these Jonin are all within the Kingdom of Rain and have not crossed the border. Sunagakure village was unable to respond to such behavior. Others have not entered your territory, and they are indeed hunting for criminals who have nothing to do with you. No matter from which point of view, they have no valid reason to send people to respond. This is a secret war between big powers. Sunagakure village chose this time to expose its spies to carry out the theft. In fact, they had their own considerations. This is actually a test for the new Hokage. Test out the new leader's style and habits. But they didn't expect that Hiruzen Sarutobi, who always showed a dovish image. We will be so decisive and tough in the face of this crisis. Caught off guard, Sand Hidden Village could only suffer this embarrassing loss. A group of Jonin guarded the border line, basically announcing the possibility of Futa Shota returning to Sunagaku village. Not long ago, Danzo had received Anbu's message. The Anbu members at the front have already encountered and fought with Shota Futa. But what everyone didn't expect was that a group of masters jointly formed by Sunagaku village and Omegakure village had gathered around Shota Futa. In this encounter, both sides suffered a lot of losses. But in the end, Shota Futa escaped. The good news is that after Futa Shota's route was figured out, Anbu has roughly deduced his possible hiding place. All that's left is to wait for the subsequent reinforcements to arrive and encircle them. It was precisely because of getting this information that Danzo decided to temporarily find a place to make repairs. This led to the scene at the beginning where they were warming themselves by a fire in an abandoned house. Kagura took a piece of freshly roasted dry food from the fire and took a bite. The hard dry food is roasted at high temperatures, turning the outer layer into a crispy texture. At this time, Tsunade and the other three were closing their eyes and taking the time to rest. After all, for the three of them, traveling for 2 consecutive days consumed a lot of energy. After stirring the fire in front of him with firewood, Danzo said to Kagura expressionlessly, "I guess there will definitely be more ninja interceptions from Yuyan village later. If this happens again, I will leave you and break out alone. At that time, I hope you can try your best to drag the enemy's footsteps." Quote. Hearing this, Kagura looked up at him, and after thinking for a moment, she nodded in agreement with his suggestion. After all, he knew very well that sending all the Jonin to block the dividing line looked really tough. But this approach is also time-limited. Let's not talk about how long Sunagaku village can endure this kind of arrangement. Just saying that this method of sending out all the high-end combat power will also leave Konoha village in an empty state, and Konoha will have to guard against attacks from other interested parties. So in general, there is not much time left for them to round up Shota Futa. In this case, it is obviously more important for Danzo to arrive directly at the scene as soon as possible. Seeing Kagura nodding, Danzo secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He knew it in his heart, even though he was the leader of the team. But the core figure of the entire team is Kagura in front of him. If he doesn't agree with his strategy, it may be difficult to implement it later. After a short rest for an hour, everyone set out towards the front again with the fire extinguished. Not long after, in a stone forest surrounded by stones, Kagura and others were once again surrounded by enemies. Danzo frowned as he waved the kunai in his hand and knocked away a dart flying towards him. Obviously, more people were sent to hinder them this time. And this time the enemy clearly knew their strength. After driving them into this stone forest, they did not show up. Instead, they hid in the pile of rocks and launched harassing long-range attacks on them. It has to be said that in this rainy environment, the ninjas of the Hidden Rain village who are good at water style have a unique advantage. As soon as Danzo rushes towards the enemy, they will immediately perform water style and hide in a puddle or pond. Then others in the distance will throw a bunch of ninja tools, forcing Danzo back to his original position again. Apparently these people were under orders to drag them here. Looking at the anxious battle situation in front of him, Danzo looked at Kagura. Kagura immediately understood what he meant, which was assigned to help him break through the siege. But Kagura was also in trouble at this time, because he did not have a suitable ninjutsu that could break the deadlock at this time. It's not that he doesn't have it, but neither the tailed beast clothes state nor Chidori is suitable to be revealed in front of Danzo at this time. The fire style that the Uchiha clan is good at cannot exert its due effect in this rainy environment. As for distinguished heavenly gods, he didn't mind using it in front of Danzo. But the problem is that the hazy rainy day limits the use of ice skills, not to mention that the opponent has never challenged him head-on, so he has no chance to use it. After thinking for a while, he made a gesture to the other three people. Tsunade and others instantly understood his intention and nodded to him. Taking a deep breath, 4 shadow clones suddenly appeared next to him. As soon as Shadow Clone appeared, it immediately rushed out in 4 different directions. Obviously these clones were meant to attract firepower, and the 5 people suddenly rushed out in the other direction. Just in front of them, several enemies suddenly emerged from the water. After this period of fighting, Kagura and others have obviously adapted to this water-style appearance. Tsunade jumped up high and slammed down, knocking all the enemies in front of her away. It is her famous skill, painful feat. Kagura also drew out her kunai and took the initiative to face the remaining enemies. Orochimaru and Jiraiya followed Danzo on the left and right as they continued to move forward. However, they had just taken 2 steps when a large number of kunai and shuriken appeared in front of them. A huge number of ninja tools poured down on the 3 of them like a downpour. Orochimaru immediately stopped and quickly formed a seal. As he puffed up his cheeks and exhaled, a huge gust of wind appeared. The storm instantly blew away all the ninja tools in front of them. Danzo and Jiraiya did not slow down at all and directly broke through this windy zone. Just when the 2 were about to leave the stone forest, the last wave of interceptions from the enemy finally appeared. The 2 ninjas stood on the last stone. As they formed the seal, hundreds of arrow blades composed of water condensed in the air. As soon as the water arrows condensed, they were shot towards the 2 of them. In the rainy environment, water style's ninjutsu is obviously enhanced, and its power and speed are obviously more powerful than usual. Seeing the huge number of attacks in front of him, Jiraiya suddenly appeared in front of Danzo. After a simple one-hand seal, his silver hair suddenly grew crazily. In the blink of an eye, the silver hair turned into hard armor, covering him and Danzo tightly. Clang, clang, clang. There was a sound similar to the collision of metal, and those seemingly sharp water blades seemed to hit a hard iron wall. Except for leaving some white marks on the fortress made of silver hair, it was impossible to break through its defense. After just tens of seconds, the attack that seemed to never stop finally disappeared. At the moment when the attack disappeared, a hole suddenly opened in the silver fortress, and Danzo rushed out like a cannonball. The figure flashed, and a ninja blocking the front suddenly changed his expression and covered his neck in horror. But his actions obviously had no effect, and blood still spurted out from between his fingers. At the moment when he lost his body, Danzo had already killed an enemy. Seeing this, the last ninja shrank his eyes and threw all the weapons on his body towards the black shadow without any reservation. Looking at several kunai flying towards him in front of him, Danzo, who could have easily blocked them, dodged in order to escape from here faster. Ignoring the enemy in front of him, he kicked off his feet and finally left the stone forest. However, it was at this time that an accident happened. With a cry of pain, a column of blood appeared on Jiraiya's chest. As Danzo left, Jiraiya covered his right chest in pain. There was a kunai that was supposed to be shot at Danzo. Because of his dodge, Jiraiya, who was behind Danzo, was caught off guard and was accidentally injured. Jiraiya's cry of pain caused Kagura's expression to change. But in the hazy rainy day, he had no idea what happened. Just as he was thinking about what happened in front of him, the shuriken in his hand was released. The enemy that had been entangled with him suddenly gave up the fight and quickly rushed forward. After being stunned for a moment, Kagura somewhat understood their intentions. Although the orders received by these ninjas were to hinder their progress, if there was an opportunity to kill directly, they would definitely not miss it. At this time, Jiraiya's right chest was full of blood, and the kunai originally inserted into his chest had been pulled out and thrown at his feet. But at this time, his blood was like dripping into the ocean full of sharks, attracting countless enemies to open their fangs towards him. Orochimaru, who was closest to Jiraiya, rushed to his side as soon as he knew he was injured. Countless kunai and darts attacked the 2 of them, although Jiraiya resisted them with the ninja technique, Needle Jizo. But in his current situation, he is approaching the limit and will no longer be able to maintain ninjutsu. The long-range attacks in front of them were ineffective. The ninjas from Yuyan village looked at each other and stopped throwing. Everyone pulled out kunai and rushed towards the 2 people from all directions. When Kagura arrived at the scene, what he saw was the scene of countless enemies rushing towards Jiraiya and Orochimaru. His eyes darkened, and several rays of blue lightning flashed across his body. As a dazzling light erupted from his body, it turned into a blue light and came to the front of the 2 people instantly. It was Kagura who no longer concealed her strength and unleashed her lightning style with all her might. At this moment, he was like lightning in the dark night, with blue electric light surrounding him. Seeing the extra young man in front of them, the people surrounding him were not surprised but overjoyed. Their hands holding the weapons waved harder, intending to split the ignorant brat in front of them in half. Kagura, who was in the center of the siege, was still in the mood to look up and look around. Seeing the bloodlust flashing in those people's eyes, the corners of his mouth turned up. He clapped his hands together, and the lightning surrounding him suddenly glowed. The electric light that was originally the size of a hair suddenly became the size of a small snake, extending in all directions with him as the center. Kagura was like a spider in a cobweb, with a blue power grid stretching out around her with a radius of more than 10 meters. The enemies around him were like moths flying into the flames, rushing into his thunder and lightning field one after another. Pa, pa, pa. Tsunade, who had just arrived, opened her mouth unconsciously in surprise. She looked at all the enemies that broke into Kagura's blue thunder and lightning. Like a puppet with its threads cut off, it fell straight to the ground. Jiraiya and Orochimaru, who were beside Kagura, were even more surprised. Jiraiya didn't know when he had removed the needle from Jizo's ninjutsu, and was staring at Kagura's back in front of him in stunned silence. At this time, Kagura was like the god of thunder descending to earth, punishing all the sinners who stood in front of him. Orochimaru's expression wasn't much better. The kunai he was holding tightly in his hand had fallen to the ground without even realizing it. Looking at Kagura's ninjutsu that he had never seen before, his eyes were full of burning desire. If water style can be enhanced to a certain extent in a rainy environment, then lightning style can be said to have doubled in this environment. At this time, Kagura was using ninjutsu, Chidori flow, which extended from Chidori. To put it simply, use lightning style to spread lightning around yourself. In Kagura's own words, he was like a power ball in the laboratory at this time. These guys, who were soaked in water, rushed into the power grid unprepared, and were basically paralyzed by the lightning style in an instant. As dozens of figures in front fell around Kagura, the remaining enemies in the rear finally understood what was happening in front of them and stopped immediately. Of course, Kagura is not yet proficient in using lightning style at this time. Most of these fallen people just lost consciousness, not real death. Seeing that no one came forward, Kagura also put away the running Chidori flow. He was not a murderous person. Looking at the people who fell in front of him, he had no intention of finishing the attack. Seeing that there were only a dozen people left not far away, they looked at their enemies with horrified expressions. He said in an indifferent tone, "If I were you, take your companions and leave now. Otherwise, I will kill you with all my strength next." Quote. After speaking, he once again took hold of the weapon in his hand to express his determination. Everyone from Yuyan village looked at each other, and after thinking for a moment, one of them hesitantly walked to Kagura. While staring at Kagura's movements, he slowly lifted up a fallen companion. Seeing that Kagura did not stop him, he immediately stood up and left the scene with a jump. Seeing this, the remaining people slowly approached Kagura and helped their companions up in twos and threes. After just a few minutes, the battlefield that was still a fierce battle suddenly cleared, leaving only Kagura and 4 others. After all enemies disappeared, Kagura continued to maintain a vigilant posture. It wasn't until a few minutes later that his body softened and he collapsed on the ground. Seeing his actions, Tsunade, who was treating Jiraiya, cast a concerned look. Orochimaru also quickly came to Kagura and helped him sit up. Kagura waved her hands towards everyone and said breathlessly, "I'm fine, don't worry. I just consumed a lot of chakra." Quote. Yes, Kagura's gesture just now was just to scare away the enemy. Although he now has a chakra capacity comparable to that of Jonin, he is only the lowest level Jonin. For example, the famous blue representative Kakashi, Naruto can still be alive and kicking after dozens of episodes, but he basically fell to the ground after using ninjutsu twice. In the past 3 days, they had not gotten any rest, and their bodies and chakra had been consumed a lot. In the battle just now, he used Shadow Clone and Chidori Flow. Even the chakra in his body is close to bottoming out. The 3 companions around him were basically the same, plus Jiraiya's injuries. Kagura could only use her heaven-defying performance just now to scare away the remaining enemies. Although he is not a bloodthirsty person, he is not a bad person either. Otherwise, how could he let go of those fallen enemies? After regaining their mobility a little, they decided to leave here quickly and find a safe place. In a stone cave, brighter dark firelight shines, and the fire raised in the cave dispels the coldness brought by the rainy day. The injured Jiraiya had a bandage on his chest and was lying on the ground to rest with his eyes closed. The kunai only hit his right chest on the shoulder blade, fortunately avoiding the fatal position. After Tsunade's treatment, there is no serious problem now. Of course, Jiraiya's current combat effectiveness must be greatly reduced. In view of everyone's current situation, Kagura decided to make temporary repairs. You need to recover at least some chakra before you can move on. Looking at the rainy weather outside the cave that seemed to never stop, Kagura was standing at the entrance of the cave on guard. To be honest, this cave is not a very suitable hiding place. Because its depth is too short, even if a fire breaks out inside, the outside world can still see the clues. But in an emergency, this is the best hiding place they can find. Well, fortunately this continuous rainy day can reduce visibility, which is one of the few advantages of this rainy day. Looking at the sky outside, Kagura comforted herself in her heart. Tsunade came to him silently and handed over a piece of hot dry food. She said softly, "Eat something, and then I'll be the guard later. You should also seize the time to take a rest, you should be almost at your limit." Quote. Looking at Tsunade's caring eyes, Kagura smiled slightly and took the food. After taking a bite silently, he was about to turn around and say something to Tsunade. Suddenly his eyes changed, he threw away the food in his hand, and looked outside warily. Amidst the patter of raindrops, a figure could be seen vaguely appearing in the distance. Although it was still far away, that figure gave Kagura a feeling of extreme danger. Kagura has only experienced this feeling once, and that time her opponent was Golden Horn not long ago. The person in front of me is very strong. Chapter 31. He noticed that Kagura's expression was different, and saw the blurry figure in the distance. Before Kagura could say anything more, Tsunade rushed back into the cave to wake up Orochimaru and Jiraiya. The cave with the flickering fire undoubtedly became a beacon of light in this rainy plain. The man in the distance had obviously noticed them and walked towards them at a leisurely pace. Kagura and others were also prepared and guarded the entrance of the cave. It's not that Kagura doesn't want to escape, it's that the surrounding terrain is too empty, and if he escapes, he will become a conspicuous target. It was difficult to tell whether the person coming across was an enemy or a friend. If he was really an enemy, fighting inside the cave would be better than fighting outside on a rainy day. Under their uneasy guard, the image of the figure gradually became clearer. The man was wearing a black tights and had a large breathing filter in his mouth. Underneath the messy hair was a pair of extremely cold eyes, and the forehead protector on his head clearly showed the logo of Yuyan Village. If these appearances can't explain his identity, then as the distance gets closer, the person following him is enough to explain everything. The man had short black hair and an ordinary face without any features. The only thing that can be remembered is his pair of small, gloomy eyes like lion majesty. Kagura and others had seen this person's appearance before, because this was exactly the target of their mission, Shota Fuda. At this time, the two people had arrived outside the cave. Seeing Kagura and the Konoha symbol on her forehead, Shota Fuda's eyes burst out with undisguised resentment. Kagura sighed helplessly, and said to the three people behind her in an inaudible voice, "I'll rush out later and you can take the opportunity to steal it." After saying that, he didn't wait for the three people to respond. He held his left hand tightly on his right wrist and leaned down to stare at the ninja from Yuyan Village in front of him. Stab, chirp. As a high-pitched bird song sounded, a powerful blue current flashed in Kagura's right hand. Facing this unknown strong man, Kagura used her strongest ninjutsu. He raised his head and looked forward, his eyes had transformed into Sharingan, and the double Magatama in his eyes were constantly rotating, obviously he had used distinguished heavenly gods at the same time. However, facing Kagura's attacking posture, the ninja from Yuyan Village remained unmoved and still watched everything indifferently with his arms folded. After a brief silence, the man spoke in a hoarse voice. "These eyes belong to the Uchiha clan of Konoha Village. Give up, your genjutsu is useless to me, but the lightning style you have is a bit interesting. Let your horse attack, you know you only have this one chance." Quote. This is not an alarmist statement, Kagura had just activated distinguished heavenly gods on the person in front of him. But obviously compared to the original Golden Horn, his genjutsu has no effect on the person in front of him. Gritting his teeth, his rotating Sharingan slowly stopped the activation of distinguished heavenly gods. With a soft drink in his mouth, the Chidori in his hand shone brightly, and his body stayed close to the ground and rushed out like a swooping falcon. The leaked energy from his right hand left a straight ravine in the path of his attack. Just when he was about to rush in front of the man, Kagura jumped up high. The Chidori in his hand has condensed to the size of an apple, and the high-pitched chirping sound from before has disappeared. This is obviously a manifestation of concentrating energy to the extreme. Just when the lightning-like blow was about to hit the man's chest, the man stretched out his right hand seemingly slowly. In Kagura's disbelieving eyes, the hand seemed to be raised slightly, and then it accurately grasped the wrist of his attacking right hand. He felt as if his right hand was imprisoned by an iron hand made of fine iron. No matter how hard he tried, he could not move forward even half a minute. Before Kagura could make the next move, the man raised his leg and kicked forward. Kagura's body instantly flew back like a cannonball and hit the stone wall next to the cave, making a big hole. Without any hesitation, at the moment Kagura was kicked away, the other three people did not follow Kagura's instructions and ran away. Instead, he rushed towards that person like Kagura. In just an instant, the three of them flew back at a faster speed, and three large holes appeared on the stone wall again. Kagura, who fell from the stone wall and knelt on one knee, couldn't help spitting out a mouthful of blood and looked at the enemy in front of her with a horrified expression. Although the golden horn he was fighting against was already in a very weak state, he never expected that a random person he met in the wilderness would be stronger than that golden horn. Seeing the four brats from Konoha being defeated in front of him, Shodanada showed an excited smile. He said to the person in front of him with a crazy look on his face, "Hanzo, kill them. When I go back, I can ask the higher-ups to give more bounties." The moment she heard the word, Hanzo, Kagura's heart suddenly jumped, and she immediately realized that the person in front of her was actually the legendary demigod. Sancho Hanzo, the future leader of a Megakure village, was regarded by the ninjas as the pinnacle of the ninja world at his peak, and enjoyed the title of demigod. In the future Second Ninja War, he will lead a country to fight against the three major countries including Konoha. Although Konoha won the battle and defeated the Hidden Rain village, it still could not defeat Sancho Hanzo. Of course, he is still in his youth and still does not have the demigod strength that people praise in the plot. But any ninja who can be called God will not be an ordinary person. No wonder I am like a newborn baby in front of him. After hearing Shodafuda's order, Hanzo looked at him with his cold eyes. This time there was a hint of chill in the hoarse voice. "I said you haven't recognized your current situation yet. If the leader of the village hadn't asked me to at least preserve your life, do you think you could have escaped the search of those Konoha Anbu?" After saying that, he ignored Shodafuda's furious expression and walked into the cave as if nothing had happened. But before going in, he paused briefly and said, "You four, if you are not dead, come in by yourself. If you try to escape, I will kill you." Quote. After saying that, he ignored Kagura and others and walked straight into the cave. Shodafuda glanced at Kagura and others with fierce eyes, but thought of the consequences of offending Hanzo if he took action here. He reluctantly put away his gaze and followed Hanzo's steps in. Kagura barely stood up and looked at the other three people with concern. Fortunately, it seemed that Hanzo had saved his strength against them, and the three of them reluctantly stood up one after another. Seeing the questioning look in his companion's eyes, Kagura said nothing, but slowly shook his head and walked into the cave. The three of them frowned, and finally had no choice but to grit their teeth and follow in. He casually found a place to sit down in the cave, and Kagura closed her eyes tiredly. In addition to taking the time to rest, he thought about the current situation. Judging from the current situation, it is at least certain that the search operation in Konoha ahead must have failed. After all, the targets have already appeared in front of them. And the reason for all this should be because Hanzo took action. Well, that's right, it is not difficult for a future demigod to personally take action and fish someone out from under Anbu's eyes. But the question is, why didn't he kill his own group? It can be seen from the short battle just now that he doesn't need to expend much effort at all to kill people like him. Recalling Hanzo's character, in the original plot, he was indeed a very contradictory person. Both kindness and cruelty appear in him to varying degrees. Hanzo cherishes the talents of powerful young ninjas. For example, during the Second Ninja War, he faced the young Sannin who was defeated by his own men. Hanzo admired them very much, so he gave Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tsunade the title of Konoha Sannin and let them go. However, in his later years, because Yahiko and Nagato threatened his position, he chose to unite with Danzo to annihilate them. Both contradictory personalities are reflected in him. But judging from the performance of his group just now, Kagura didn't think it was worth Danzo letting him and others go. So what will happen to this group of people in the future? After Kagura thought for a while, he seemed to understand Hanzo's thoughts. The current Hanzo is not the powerful being who can single-handedly compete with the three kingdoms in the future, and he is not even the leader of Yuyan village yet. Judging from the previous conversation between him and Shota Fuda, the main reason why the two of them appeared here was just that Hanzo was executing the orders issued by the village leader. The current situation is that all Jonin in Konoha are concentrated in the Land of Rain, and a large number of Anbu are conducting a blanket search not far away. Regarding Shota Fuda's attitude, Hanzo was more interested in the mission and didn't want to cause trouble. If you kill people like yourself here, there will be Uchiha's clan members and Tsunadeheim among them. It is conceivable that if their bodies are discovered by Anbu, it may be the trigger for the outbreak of war for the Rain country. This is the main reason why Hanzo doesn't hurt them. After figuring this out, Kagura secretly breathed a sigh of relief. For him, as long as his life is not threatened, other things are not that important. Perhaps feeling Kagura's body relax, Hanzo looked towards him with interest. After observing for a moment, he asked, "May I have your name?" In response to Hanzo's question, Kagura showed no expression on her face, but she still responded. Uchiha Kagura, Uchiha Kagura, I've never seen that lightning style you just used, was it your own creation ninjutsu? Hanzo, who had already confirmed the Kagura clan through Sharingan, was not surprised by his name, but instead mentioned the ninjutsu he was interested in. The ninjutsu of Chidori, also known as Reikiri, was created by Kakashi. Kakashi was not born yet, so this ninjutsu has naturally never appeared. After thinking for a few seconds, Kagura nodded. Although I didn't create it myself, the system gave it to me, so it's not too much to admit the invention right. Seeing Kagura's response, Hanzo's eyes flashed with appreciation, and he continued. The Uchiha clan is indeed an enviable clan. Every generation has surprising talents. Quote. He added some more firewood to the fire in front of him, then looked up at everyone and continued. Don't worry, I didn't want to kill you. But you need to stay with me for the next 2 days. As long as I bring this person to the target location, I will let you go. Now there are all your people outside. If you are allowed to leave now to spread the word, it will attract people from Konoha. I will have a headache. Quote. Sure enough, Kagura had a look of understanding on her face. Hanzo's thoughts were as he had deduced. But after hearing what Hanzo said, Shota Fuda's face turned ugly. He looked at Hanzo with a somewhat fearful look and said, "Why not just kill them, wouldn't it be more convenient? If you feel that the task reward is too small and does not include these, I can add it in my own name." Quote. However, in the face of Shota Fuda's request, Hanzo didn't even look at him, and still flicked the fire in front of him and said, "I'm just the person who performs the task. If you have any objections to the content of the task, go to Yuyan village to find someone to discuss it yourself. Now, I am only responsible for delivering you safely to the designated place." Quote. Faced with Hanzo's merciless words, Shota Fuda forced himself to calm down even though the muscles on his face twitched slightly. Along the way, he knew the strength of the man in front of him. In his opinion, even the powerful Anbu could not make a single move in front of him, and he was not as strong as Chunin, so there was no need to compare. Tsunade on the side was treating Jiraiya while paying attention to the situation here. This unlucky Jiraiya, the wound that had begun to recover was injured again by Hanzo's blow, and blood began to flow again. Fortunately, he had already experienced it once. Tsunade easily stopped his bleeding this time and was using healing techniques to speed up the healing of the wound. When she heard Hanzo's words, her tense heart relaxed. There was no way, after the short battle just now, she already knew that Hanzo was not on the same level as them. Even Kagura, who is usually the most powerful, cannot survive a single round in his hands. At this time, they did not have such a strong sense of ninja responsibility. For them, how to survive was the first factor. When she heard Hanzo's refutation of Shotafuta's words, she finally couldn't help but laugh. In the closed cave, her laughter seemed so abrupt, echoing throughout the space. Shotafuta, who was already unhappy, heard the laughter, and his anger surged up again. He glared at him and said viciously, "Snort, with just a few of you genin, even if Hanzo refuses to take action, I can handle it myself." Quote. As he spoke, he stood up, as if he really planned to do it himself. At this time, Kagura, who had closed her eyes, opened her eyes again, and the Sharingan in her eyes slowly turned. A cold gaze swept over him, and Futa Shota felt a chill all over his body, and looked at Kagura warily. Kagura didn't have the slightest fondness for the person in front of him, so he said indifferently, "If Hanzo hadn't been here, it would have been just a waste like you. He had already returned to the village with us under my control." Quote. Hearing Kagura's contemptuous words, Futa Shota was furious and was about to say something. At this time Hanzo finally looked at him with an idiot look and interjected, "Sit down, you can't even judge the strength of your opponent. Don't be dissatisfied, that kid is telling the truth." Quote. After hearing Hanzo's words, Shotafuta's expression condensed. If it was just that kid, he would only regard it as the boy's provocation. But if it was Hanzo who said it, he would trust the other party's judgment. He sat down again angrily. He seemed to have thought of something, and turned to Kagura with an unhappy look on his face and said, "What can a brat like you know? As genin, you are nothing more than tools in the hands of those in Konoha. The so-called mission you performed this time is nothing but lies." Quote. Kagura frowned after hearing what Shotafuta said. But before he could say anything, Tsunade on the side spoke first and asked, "What do you mean?" Looking up at the four brats in front of him, and seeing the doubts in their eyes, Shotafuta showed a smile again and said, "What do I mean? I mean you were all deceived by that Hokage-sama and Danzo-sama. The instructions you received should be that I stole the forbidden book, so you have to come out to arrest me, right? Yes, I did steal it, but what I stole was not a forbidden book at all." Quote. Having said this, he seemed to have thought of something, and continued through gritted teeth. "That's a bait. It's a bait used by your senior officials to lure the spies lurking in Konoha village. They moved us out this way and then quickly cleared us. All of this is just a plan by the newly appointed Hokage to clean up the internal affairs." Quote. Hearing Shotafuta's explanation, Kagura felt that all the confusion in the past few days had been solved. Why was the forbidden book, regarded as a treasure, so easily stolen by spies? Why were those high-level officials able to react so quickly as soon as the incident happened, and even immediately send out all the Jonin to block the escape route? Why hasn't the system even issued a task to itself until now? Because the specific content of this A-level mission is to capture Shotafuta and retrieve the forbidden book in his hand. Since he doesn't have the forbidden book in his hand, this mission is naturally not a real A-level mission. This is why the system did not release tasks together this time. However, although he was a little surprised, Kagura didn't think there was anything wrong with what Konoha's senior officials did this time. Isn't it normal to find out the spies in the village and clean up the internal environment? The only surprise may be that Hiruzen Sarutobi did not expect that Kagura and others would encounter enemies like Hanzo in the periphery. After Tsunade and others heard what Shotafuta said, they looked at each other and showed the same expressions. At this moment, Hanzo waved his hand forward, extinguished the fire in front of him and stood up. After looking around for a week, he said to everyone, "Okay, let's move on. Konoha brats, please follow me for a while." Quote. Faced with Hanzo's invitation, it was obvious that Kagura and the others had no right to refuse. Without saying anything, everyone silently followed the two people out of the cave. Jiraiya, who was still injured, could only be helped forward by Orochimaru and Kagura. The rain, which seemed to last forever, gradually became smaller and stopped. Although the sun was still not visible and the sky was still full of dark clouds, the long-awaited rainless weather still made Kagura feel better. Naturally, Hanzo would not pay special attention to Jiraiya's footsteps. He still kept his own pace and walked towards the unknown location. Kagura and others, who were at the end of the team, made a conscious effort to keep up. Although Hanzo did not urge him, nor did he look back at them. But Kagura and others knew very well that if they used the excuse of Jiraiya's injury to fall behind, I am afraid that this seemingly benevolent enemy will chop the butcher knife on Jiraiya's head in the next second. So even though Hanzo didn't say a word along the way, they spontaneously quickened their pace. In rainy weather like the land of rain, it is difficult to define the time of day. After walking for about half a day, the sky was unknowingly replaced by a dark curtain, and Hanzo, who was walking at the front of the team, stopped for the first time. He raised his head and looked at the sky. Having lived in the land of rain since he was a child, he instantly judged that tonight would also be a rare rainless state. He casually came to the foot of a big tree and sat down without saying a word. Although there was no instruction, everyone behind him understood that he wanted to rest where he was. Panting slightly, Kagura put down Jiraiya on his back and helped him sit against the tree. Although he had been treated by Tsunade, Jiraiya, who had been injured twice in a short period of time and had lost a lot of blood, was now extremely weak. In the beginning, he was indeed supported by Kagura and Orochimaru. But as Hanzo's pace quickened, it was really impossible to keep up with this supported walking method. Finally, Kagura decided to carry Jiraiya on her back. Looking up and seeing Jiraiya's apologetic eyes, Kagura smiled slightly and shook her head gently. Seeing that Hanzo had no idea of setting up a fire, and even though there was no rain, it was indeed impossible to light a fire in the damp woods. The four of them, Kagura, silently took out the dry food from their bodies and started eating. At this time, the most correct thing to do is to seize the time to replenish your physical strength. Looking at the movements of the four of them, Hanzo secretly nodded. He has always admired such smart people. He finally spoke and said, "I will let you go at noon tomorrow at the latest." After saying that, he closed his eyes and leaned against the tree without making any sound. Although there was a hint of ferocity on Shotofuda's face after hearing what he said, he did not say anything in the end. As for Kagura and the others, it was as if they didn't hear Hanzo's words and continued to eat the dry food in their hands in silence. Time slowly turned to late night, and the dark clouds in the sky that seemed to never disperse finally faded away. The bright moonlight spread to the earth, giving the woods a silvery halo. At this time, everyone had closed their eyes, breathing evenly and leaning against the tree to rest. Suddenly, Hanzo, who seemed to be sleeping soundly, suddenly opened his eyes. Whoosh! The moment he opened his eyes, with a slight sound, a black kunai suddenly shot towards his upper body. Hey! There was a dull sound of digging into the wood, and Hanzo, who was sitting there, disappeared, and the kunai was inserted deeply into the trunk of the tree. But a hissing sound came from the kunai, and there was an explosive talisman tied to the kunai. Bang! With a loud noise, the kunai exploded violently. Kagura had already woken up when the kunai hit the tree trunk. His first reaction was to grab Jiraiya beside him and quickly retreat. Although Orochimaru and Tsunade were a step behind him, they also rushed out before the explosion. A huge plume of smoke rose, even as the Sharingan was activated. But Kagura could only barely see that there were two black figures intersecting continuously inside, and the sound of weapons colliding could be heard from time to time. As the smoke slowly dissipated, everyone finally saw the specific situation of the battle clearly. At this time, Hanzo and a man were holding weapons and were in a stalemate, and that man was Danzo, who had just left the day before. Danzo had actually been following them since early in the morning. After the breakout that day, before he reached his destination, he received news from Shadow's pet that the target had escaped. He was the main planner of this plan, and it was he who took the initiative to propose to Hiruzen Sarutobi to use fishing bait to clean up the village's spies. Shotofuda is actually not his main target, but the companions who helped Shotofuda commit the theft were the main targets of his plan. It's just a Chunin. Now that his identity is known, it is impossible to cause much trouble under Anbu's surveillance. But the other spies involved behind him are the big fish hiding behind it. But he didn't expect that in order to prevent Konoha from getting caught, Sunagaku village actually hired ninjas from the country of rain to help him escape during this operation. Although many traitors or spies who escaped from Konoha with Shodanada were caught along the way, they were all Chunin or below characters. The real behind-the-scenes organizer did not reveal his true identity. In this way, the existence of Shotofuda appears to be more important than imagined. As long as you catch him and use ninjutsu to interrogate him, you will always get some unexpected gains. So after receiving the news from Anbu, he immediately stopped moving and started searching the place. As the leader of an organization like Root, Danzo's tracking technology is naturally top-notch. What's more, God was kind, and the rain that most disturbed our footsteps stopped. So 3 hours ago, he had already discovered this large team. Although he was surprised as to why Kagura and others were among them, what caught his attention was the presence of Hanzo. As a ninja who survived the battlefield, he could naturally sense the danger from the young man at the front. After thinking for a moment, he sent the message to Anbu behind him and followed it alone. It has to be said that in terms of tracking and concealment, Danzo is a top-notch master. After several hours of tracking, Hanzo didn't notice at all. Danzo was also a very patient person. Even when he saw them stopping to rest, he still didn't take action, he just hid above and watched. As the night progressed, he finally launched the long-awaited blow. The two people who were in a stalemate with each other suddenly exerted force and quickly retreated. Danzo, who was still retreating, suddenly threw out several shurikens, and then formed a seal with one hand, which suddenly became an overwhelming number. Facing this intensive kunai attack, Hanzo's response was very simple. He calmly used the kunai in his hand to fly away the hidden weapons in front of him one by one. However, after a few seconds, his expression suddenly changed. I saw those shurikens that had been thrown flying around behind him along a trajectory that was contrary to common sense. Kagura, who was standing not far away, used Sharingan to see the clues. All the shurikens thrown by Danzo have an almost unobservable thread behind them. Danzo suddenly pulled his hand back, and strips of silver light flashed. The shurikens that were thrown away by Hanzo suddenly flew behind him. At the critical moment, Hanzo twisted his body to avoid the attack. But when he came back to his senses, he found that he had been bound by the thin but actually tough thin threads and shurikens. Hiss! A familiar voice came again, and the dozens of shurikens tied to his body were suddenly lit. Taking a closer look, all the shurikens were tied with yellow detonating charms. Bang! An explosion sounded louder than before, and a huge fireball exploded where Hanzo was standing. This explosion set off a huge gray mist, which instantly filled the entire forest. Danzo, who succeeded with one blow, didn't care about the results of the battle at all. He kicked his feet hard and quickly rushed towards Kagura and others. In front of him was the astonished Futa Shota. From the beginning to the end, he had no intention of deciding the outcome with Hanzo. All his attacks were just to hold back the strong man. Danzo's target from the beginning was Shota Futa, who was standing aside. Under Shota Futa's disbelieving gaze, the kunai in Danzo's hand plunged into his body. Danzo's eyes narrowed, and Shota Futa's incredulous face gradually disappeared in front of him, replaced by a piece of wood. As a senior spy, Shota Futa may not be very strong, but when it comes to caution, he is definitely not lacking. As early as the two started fighting, he knew that this was Konoha's man who came to arrest him. While Kagura was focusing on the battle ahead, he even secretly used the substitution technique under his Sharingan eyes. After vigorously shaking off the wooden section that was hid in his hand, Danzo quickly scanned the surroundings with his wolf-like eyes. A black shadow flashed past. It was Shota Futa who was hiding in the darkness. He quickly rushed towards Kagura and others. Seeing this, Kagura and others immediately assumed a fighting stance. However, under Kagura's astonished gaze, Shota Futa suddenly changed direction when he was about to meet him. Slightly dazed, he immediately understood Shota Futa's goal, but it was already too late. I saw Shota Futa's figure flashing past, and Jiraiya, who was lying next to Kagura, was already being held hostage by his hands. When his figure stopped, Jiraiya was already tightly wrapped in front of him with his right hand. He stood behind Jiraiya warily, looking at Kagura, Danzo and others. Holding a kunai in his left hand, he pressed it against Jiraiya's neck and said cruelly, "Don't even move, otherwise I will kill this brat." Quote. Coercing hostages was obviously an idea he had thought about for a long time, and Jiraiya, who was unable to move due to injuries, naturally became the best target. Jiraiya turned his head to look at Shota Futa with shame and resentment, but he really didn't have the extra strength to resist. In this way, the scene once again formed a stalemate. And just when this episode happened, the gray fog on the other side gradually dissipated. As the saying goes, there is no harm in the smoke. Hanzo's unscathed figure slowly emerged from the gray mist. Although the expression on his face was still cold, there was obviously a hint of anger in his eyes. Without saying anything, he accelerated and rushed towards Danzo. Seeing this strong man attacking again, Danzo also had a hint of anxiety in his eyes. As if he had made some decision in his heart, he gritted his teeth and rushed towards Shotafuda again. Danzo hadn't arrived yet, but he had already thrown several darts at Shotafuda. Seeing Danzo ignore the hostages in his hands and launch an attack, a cruel look flashed in Fuda Shota's eyes. He raised the hostage in his hand to resist without hesitation. Following Jiraiya's muttering and Tsunade and Orochimaru's exclamations, several darts pierced into Jiraiya's body and several blood flowers exploded. However, facing this situation, the expression on Danzo's face remained unchanged, and the dagger in his hand flashed with cold light. His body still rushed towards Fuda Shota at high speed, and the sword in his hand suddenly thrust forward. He wanted to pierce Jiraiya's body directly and hit Shotafuda. Tsunade and Orochimaru, who did not expect Danzo to make such a move, exclaimed. Orochimaru's hand had grown longer and he wanted to stop him. But their actions were always one step behind Danzo, and it seemed impossible to catch up. In the desperate eyes of the two people, just when Danzo's shuriken was about to penetrate Jiraiya's body, there was a loud shout and an explosion. Danzo, how dare you! A blue lightning suddenly appeared at the scene, and the target of that lightning was Danzo in front. Feeling the rapidly approaching offensive behind him, Danzo narrowed his eyes and made a decision in a moment. The shuriken he had thrust out suddenly retracted, and his body forcibly turned around in an indescribable posture. At the moment when the lightning was about to hit him, he finally managed to defend himself and barely blocked the blow with the weapon in his hand. Boom! With a crisp sound, Danzo was knocked back several meters. But after flying upside down, he quickly adjusted his posture in the air and landed steadily on the ground. He looked up and saw that the one attacking him was Kagura with the blue electric ball flashing in his hand. The Kagura that activated Chidori slowly dissipated. Ninjutsu raised his head and glared at Danzo. Danzo was stunned the moment he saw his eyes, because right in front of him was a pair of 3 Magatama Sharingan. 9-year-old Sanmagatama, he muttered in disbelief. Time went back a few seconds, and Kagura was also caught off guard by Danzo's attack. He could only watch helplessly as those darts pierced into Jiraiya's body. At that moment, Kagura felt as if time had been pressed on the pause button. Jiraiya's painful eyes and the blood splashing on his body were clearly reflected in his eyes. At this time, several images seemed to flash through his mind. That was the scene before Jiraiya's death in the original plot. With scattered white hair and a smile without regrets, the figure slowly sank to the bottom of the lake. Am I really unable to change their fate? For the first time since time travel, Kagura felt a sense of powerlessness. And along with that feeling of powerlessness is an unprecedented anger. No, all tragedies will be changed in my hands. As this firm thought rose, even Kagura didn't notice that a Magatama slowly appeared in his Sharingan. If Kagura could open the system and check at this time, he would find that his pupil technique column has changed. The progress instantly reached 100%, and the attributes also changed too. Eye technique, 3 Magatama Sharingan, progress 0.1%. In fact, after these 2 months of practice, the progress of his eye skills has reached 99%. But in the last 1%, Kagura found that no matter how hard she practiced, she still couldn't make a breakthrough. In fact, this is precisely because he lacks the emotions needed to advance. Since he used system help for the last advancement, he was not aware of this. After traveling through time, his goal is to survive. For this reason, he has always kept a low profile, and it can even be said that he just wants to survive until the day when the protagonist solves everything. But without even realizing it, the 3 members of Class 7 gradually became indispensable companions in his heart. They perform tasks together, play together, and worry together. Kagura began to get used to the presence of these people in his life, and he even began to work hard to change the miserable fate of these companions. However, it was at this moment that the scene of Jiraiya being injured appeared in front of him. The bright blood flowers seemed to break through some of the shackles in his heart, and the strong emotions made him finally reach the realm of 3 Magatama at this moment. It was at that moment that he subconsciously used Chidori. At this time, he didn't notice that Chidori, which originally required a certain amount of energy, was used instantly by him this time. Kagura, who had forced Danzo back, slowly stood up straight and glared at Danzo in front of him. At this time, a hint of fear flashed in Danzo's eyes. The genius of Uchiha was able to possess 3 Magatama at the age of 9. It can be said that even Uchiha Madara did not have the talent of the boy in front of him. At this time, Hanzo finally arrived on the battlefield. Seeing that his mission target was not injured, he did not take the opportunity to launch an attack. With just a flash, he stood behind Shotofuda, looking warily at Kagura and Danzo facing each other in front of him. Seeing Hanzo's arrival, Danzo knew in his heart that his plan of a quick victory had failed. He frowned and looked at Kagura, and said in a questioning tone, "Do you know what you are doing?" At this time, Tsunade and Orochimaru finally rushed to Kagura, and they also looked at Danzo with angry eyes. Kagura patted the dust on his feet, his face returned to calmness and he replied, "Of course I know what I'm doing. I know even more that Jiraiya is my companion." Faced with Kagura's response, Danzo said noncommittally, "Companion, do you think you guys are still playing house in ninja school? I told Hiruzen Sarutobi that the education in the village is too peaceful now. People of your generation have forgotten what a ninja is. Completing the mission is the first element of being a ninja. The sacrifice of companions in the process is not the reason that hinders the mission. What you just did is a disgrace to ninjas." Looking at Danzo, who was speaking with an angry look on his face, Kagura pondered for a moment and then suddenly chuckled. He looked at Danzo with a pair of bright eyes and said disdainfully, "I'm sorry, I don't agree with your philosophy. My philosophy on life can only be defined by me. Only I can decide what kind of ninja I want to be." After saying that, he no longer paid attention to Danzo in front of him, but turned to Hanzo on the side and said, "Hey, Hanzo, I have a deal, would you be interested in hearing about it?" "Hey, Hanzo, I have a deal that you would be interested in hearing about." Facing Kagura's words, Hanzo did not refuse, but he also did not respond. He just looked at Kagura silently and motioned for him to continue. Kagura didn't care about his response and continued, "I'm here to help you stop this Konoha pursuer. You ask Shotofuda to put down my companion, and then you go directly." Quote. Seeing the thoughtful look on Hanzo's face, Kagura said, "Perhaps you still don't know who the person in front of you is. His name is Danzo, and he is Jonin, the leader of our 7th team. The most important is..." After saying this, he paused for a moment before continuing. "The most important thing is that he is the leader of Konoha's roots. You can also understand that he was Anbu's mentor for a large part of Konoha's future. Based on what I know about him, he must have sent a message to Anbu not far away before taking action. I believe those Anbu must be on their way here now. If you continue to hesitate, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave even if you want to wait." Quote. With Kagura's explanation, Hanzo's hesitation slowly dissipated and his expression returned to calm again. Without saying much, he replied one word to Kagura. "Good." Then, he turned to look at Shotofuda and gave a concise order. "Let him go." Fuda Shota frowned, not wanting to let go of the only hostage just like that. At this moment, he wanted to ask Hanzo, "Why do you believe that kid's words?" But seeing Hanzo's unquestionable look, he still flinched. With a dissatisfied click of his tongue, he roughly pushed the already unconscious Jiraiya forward. Seeing Jiraiya rushing towards him, Orochimaru rushed over immediately and picked up Jiraiya, who was about to fall to the ground. Tsunade glared at Shotofuda, and then immediately went to check on Jiraiya's injuries. At this time, Jiraiya's eyes were tightly closed, and a lot of blood was flowing on his body. Almost all of those darts were submerged in his body, and only a small part was exposed. Quickly pulling out all the darts, and immediately using healing techniques to stop the bleeding. After feeling Jiraiya's breathing gradually become steady, Tsunade felt relieved. She nodded to Kagura, who looked at her, indicating that Jiraiya was not in any danger. Seeing Tsunade's gesture, Kagura also breathed a sigh of relief. After sending Jiraiya out, Hanzo didn't waste any time, just grabbed Futa and ran away. As for Danzo, he did not stop him from the beginning to the end, but just watched it all indifferently. In fact, it was not that he acquiesced in Kagura's so-called deal, but he knew very well that due to Hanzo's deliberate precautions, he had lost the possibility of capturing Futa alive. After Hanzo had gone away, he spoke slowly. Speaking of which, I'd really like to know what cards you have to propose such a deal. Why do you think you have the strength to stop me? Looking at it, he casually looked at Kagura's right hand and continued. Just that lightning style move you just made. Indeed, that move is very fast and powerful. But you should know very well in your heart that you cannot hit me if I am prepared. Speaking of which, having said this, he slowly narrowed his eyes, looked at Kagura critically and said. Golden Horn probably died from that move at that time. Lightning style damage, that trace of a straight sprint of hundreds of meters. I see. Ignoring Danzo's speculation, Kagura looked at Danzo calmly and said. Well, your suspicion is indeed correct. It is precisely because of this that I have been trying to hide this ninjutsu move from you before. But there's one thing you guessed wrong. It's not that I'm blocking your confidence. Quote. At this time, the three Magatama in Kagura's eyes looking at Danzo slowly began to rotate. He still kept speaking at a fast pace and said. Aren't you always curious about Sharingan and Uchiha's power? I'll let you see it today. Looking at the rotating pair of Sharingan, Danzo felt that he seemed to be trapped in those strange eyes, staring at them tightly and unable to look away. It seemed like an instant, and it seemed like a long time passed before Danzo finally woke up. Just realizing the surrounding environment, a trace of confusion flashed in his eyes. The environment the two of them were in at this time had not changed. Of course, it would not be accurate to say there had been no change. Tsunade and others who were supposed to be behind Kagura disappeared, and the original night sky also changed. The starry night disappeared, replaced by a sky as red as blood. The surrounding trees completely turned into black shadows, standing abruptly on the ground like silhouettes. Kagura smiled slightly, stretched out his hands and said, Welcome to my world. Regarding the changes around him, Danzo still didn't seem to be panicked at all. After looking around for a week he said, Is this genjutsu made using Sharingan? Hey, if it's just genjutsu, I'm afraid it won't be able to trap me. Quote. Hearing this, Kagura smiled even more happily. Just genjutsu. This is an S-level ninjutsu, coming from the special skill of the genius Uchiha Itachi, Tsukuyomi. Yes, this is the S-level ninjutsu that Kagura drew after killing Golden Horn last time. But after drawing it, Kagura encountered a problem. He found that he could not completely release this ninjutsu. It was obviously just an S-level ninjutsu like Distinguished Heavenly Gods, but Kagura found that it just couldn't be released perfectly. After struggling for a long time, he also understood that this might be due to the fact that he was still the second Magatama Sharingan. Both genjutsu, Tsukuyomi and Distinguished Heavenly Gods, actually rely on Sharingan to operate. Therefore, the level of Sharingan plays an absolutely important role in the performance of these two. In fact, Kagura has always felt that she has not fully utilized the power of Distinguished Heavenly Gods. As a ninjutsu known as the strongest genjutsu, Distinguished Heavenly Gods seems too restrictive in his hands. Every time you fight, if you encounter an opponent who is stronger than yourself, the effect of this move will be almost zero. But all this disappeared after Kagura broke through to the three Magatama Sharingan. Just now, Kagura vaguely felt that the shackles that restricted her from using Tsukuyomi were gone. The mentality of giving it a try actually turned out to be successful. Hearing Danzo's disapproving remarks, Kagura's lips curled up slightly. He responded unhurriedly, Really, then you try. Danzo frowned after hearing Kagura's confident speech. However, he still raised one hand to perform the seal and shouted loudly. Untie. However, all his movements were like a clown, and the surrounding scenery did not change at all. At this time, Danzo finally had a look of panic on his face. Seeing this, Kagura spoke again. I've given you a chance, and now it's my turn. As soon as he finished speaking, Danzo found himself tied to the cross in the blink of an eye, and Kagura was holding a familiar dagger in his hand. Kagura was carefully observing the dagger in his hand, and said while looking. Well, is this the sword you just planned to pierce into Jiraiya's body? Indeed, the workmanship is good. Quote, after saying that, without any extra words, Kagura picked up the dagger and stabbed Danzo. The pain of his flesh being pierced by a sharp blade was clearly transmitted to Danzo's mind. He murmured and looked at Kagura with angry eyes. However, in the face of his glare, Kagura still maintained a smile. He reached out and grabbed it in the air, and an identical dagger appeared in his hand again. He approached Danzo and said softly in his ear, "Don't worry, we still have a lot of time to play slowly." As he spoke, he thrust the dagger in his hand again. Time passed slowly like this, maybe 5 minutes, maybe an hour. Danzo's body was covered with daggers, and his muttering at the beginning turned into a wail. What didn't change was his eyes that were still glaring at Kagura. Feeling another dagger piercing his body, he finally asked, Why didn't I die or pass out?" Hearing his question, Kagura once again took out a short sword from midair and answered, "Don't worry, I said this is my world. In this case, you will stay awake here as long as I want. Don't worry, we still have 3 full days to play slowly." Quote, hearing the time of 3 days, panic finally began to rise in Danzo's angry eyes. In the real world, Tsunade looked at Kagura and Danzo in confusion. Just after Kagura said those words to Danzo, the two of them suddenly froze in place as if they were possessed. She and Orochimaru looked at each other in confusion, and then they walked towards Kagura and Danzo respectively and started to check. But they obviously knew that this might be because Kagura used genjutsu, so they didn't touch their bodies. Just when Orochimaru walked up to Danzo to observe, he saw Danzo soften and suddenly fall to the ground. Kagura on the other side didn't feel much better. She suddenly knelt down on one knee and covered her eyes. The two people quickly approached, and Kagura kept panting and said, I didn't expect this ninjutsu's chakra consumption would be so large." After saying that, without waiting for the two of them to speak, he quickly gave instructions. "You remember what I say next. After I pass out, you can explain this to Anbu who comes here." Tsunade and the others did not wait long. About half an hour later, Anbu from Konoha found them. These Anbu wear vest-type combat attire for easy combat, a defensive vest-type armor on the outside, and a white mask imitating an animal on their face. Seeing the devastated forest, he also saw the fallen Jiraiya, Kagura, and that Lord Danzo. Although separated by masks, Tsunade and Orochimaru could still feel the shock in Anbu's heart. After roughly listening to the stories of the remaining 2 people, the shock of these people became more obvious. Anbu, the leader, looked at Tsunade with a sincere face in astonishment and asked, "You mean to say that Danzo-sama fell unconscious after fighting a powerful enemy from the Hidden Rain village to protect you?" Facing Anbu's question, Tsunade wiped the non-existent tears from her eyes and choked Kaido. "Yes, Mr. Danzo, in order to protect Jiraiya and Kagura who were held hostage, they fought desperately against the enemy. But that enemy was so powerful that Danzo-sensei was hit by that person's genjutsu and fell to the ground. If it weren't for the fact that the enemy was also seriously injured and left, we might not have survived. Danzo-sensei, he is really a good teacher who cares about his students. Woo 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 woo. It has to be said that women are all born actors." Under Orochimaru's helpless and slightly horrified gaze, Tsunade sobbed while telling the so-called truth. At the end, she even cried uncontrollably. At that moment, Orochimaru even doubted whether everything he had seen before was caused by some kind of genjutsu, and what Tsunade said was the truth. Even Orochimaru, who knew the inside story, began to doubt himself, let alone those Anbu. In fact, it stands to reason that there are no loopholes in Tsunade's narrative. The only problem lies in the protagonist in the content. Unlike ordinary Hokage village ninjas, these Anbu people know clearly the true face of Danzo-sama. Such a person would rather give up the mission to save his students. You might as well say that the little Uchiha guy lying down is the reincarnation of Uchiha Madara. But the crying little girl in front of her is not a good person. This is the famous Tsunade Hime. You have to veto her on the spot, and it's hard to say who she will report you to when she gets back. Under the dilemma, the leader changed his mind and chose to believe Tsunade. There is nothing we can do, the person involved is lying on the ground. If there is any problem, we should wait until he wakes up. After looking around for a week, he immediately decided to send the 2 genin and 3 wounded people in front of him back to Konoha. In any case, Lord Danzo's injury shows that there is indeed a powerful enemy nearby. In this case, these genin are no longer suitable to stay here. 2 days later, in Konoha Hospital, Kagura slowly woke up, and what she saw was still the familiar ceiling. The ward where he was lying this time was actually the same one as last time. After staring blankly at the ceiling for several minutes, his pupils slowly began to focus. At this time, the door to the side was opened. After a while, 2 happy voices came one after another. Kagura, you're awake. Slowly turning his head and looking, the people coming were Tsunade and Orochimaru. Tsunade walked to the bed, put down the fruit in her hand, and looked at him caringly. When she saw Kagura's eyes looking back, she instantly knew what Kagura meant, patted him gently and said, "Do not worry, I have already explained clearly how Danzo-sensei saved us." Quote. After hearing this, Kagura finally felt relieved after confirming that Tsunade had indeed followed her instructions. He didn't speak, but nodded slightly towards the 2 of them. The next day, Kagura had already left the hospital and stood in front of Sarutobi Hiruzen. Unlike last time, Kagura was unconscious this time because he ran out of chakra in a short period of time. Physically, he actually had no injuries. So this time, he was discharged from the hospital in just 1 day and was summoned by Master Hokage immediately. Looking at the handsome young man standing in front of him, Sarutobi Hiruzen rubbed his brow with a headache. Regarding Danzo's injury, he already knew the details through the information sent by Anbu. He even met Tsunade and Orochimaru in person yesterday and asked them again in person. But what the 2 people recounted in front of him was still the same as what Anbu said. As Danzo's friend for many years, why didn't he understand Danzo's character? What's more, Danzo personally planned and participated in this incident. How could he give up the important goal of capturing Shota Fuda at the last moment? But the 2 people unanimously agreed, and there was nothing he could do. In desperation, he had to call Kagura to ask again. "So, your statement is the same as Tsunade's?" Narrowing his eyes, Sarutobi Hiruzen asked directly without too much nonsense. However, Kagura's expression did not change at all, and she just nodded solemnly. In fact, the first half of the rhetoric he taught was no different from the truth, but it started to change when Danzo rushed towards Empress Nada Shota who had kidnapped Jiraiya. The purpose of rushing towards Shota Fuda was to save Jiraiya, but Jiraiya's injury was only due to an accidental injury. In the end, in order to save everyone, he fought with Hanzo, and then fell down after receiving the enemy's genjutsu. As for Hokage's suspicion, it was not beyond his expectation. Sure enough, seeing him nod, Hiruzen Sarutobi said angrily, "Do you think I will believe it? I still know Danzo's character, are you sure you want to stick to this statement?" Faced with this suspicion, Kagura's response is simple. He looked at Sarutobi Hiruzen sincerely and said, "I won't allow you to slander Danzo-sensei like this." What do you mean by this? Sarutobi Hiruzen was also confused by Kagura for a moment. Without giving him time to think, Kagura continued. "Although we only got along with Danzo-sama for a short period of time. But through this period of time together, I deeply felt that under teacher Danzo's cold appearance, there is a fiery heart. He loves the motherland, loves the people in the village, and takes meticulous care of his subordinates. Although you are Hokage-sama, I do not allow you to slander Danzo-sensei's noble character like this. Although he did not complete the task this time, I think this also proves that he has a soft heart. Danzo-sensei, he is a good person. If you want to punish him, Hokage-sama, we are willing to accept the punishment together." Following Kagura's words, Sarutobi Hiruzen felt that his mind seemed a little unable to turn around. "When did I say I would punish Danzo? No, the most important thing is who is the person you mentioned who loves the people and loves his subordinates. We are not talking about the same person." He really never thought that in this life, he would still associate the words Danzo with a good person. Looking at the confused Sarutobi Hiruzen in front of him, Kagura smiled secretly in her heart. Sure enough, sincerity is the last resort. In fact, he didn't worry at all that these lies would be exposed after Danzo woke up. At that time, After Danzo won the Tsukuyomi, he also used distinguished heavenly gods to adjust his memory. After upgrading to Sanmagatama, his distinguished heavenly gods can already do more things. He directly deleted Danzo's memory of rushing towards Jiraiya, and even forgot about his knowledge of Chidori. And this is also the main reason why he finally exhausted all the chakra and became comatose. After all, he used 2S level ninjutsu at the same time. Looking at the still confused Sarutobi Hiruzen in front of him, he struck while the iron was hot and continued. It's just after this incident that we have a profound understanding of the gap between ourselves and Danzo-sensei. Therefore, after discussion among the four of us, we decided that we would like to formally apply to you, Hokage-sama. We hope that Mr. Danzo will no longer be our instructor. We don't want to drag him down anymore. Quote. After hearing this, Sarutobi Hiruzen, who was still doubting himself, suddenly woke up. He looked at Kagura in surprise and asked, "You mean you want to form a team of 4 of you?" Seeing Kagura nodding in response, he began to think deeply. Well, judging from Kagura's request, there are indeed some problems. But that wasn't his biggest concern. Even today I specifically asked Kagura to come over for questioning, and my original intention was just to give him a beating. Its purpose is to tell him, "Boy, everyone knows what you are doing, so don't go too far in the future." As for Danzo's vigilance towards Kagura, Sarutobi Hiruzen has always been aware of it. When Danzo offered to be the leading teacher of Class 7, he had clearly expressed his opposition. And the consequences this time also showed that they really couldn't be in contact with each other for a long time. This time they were just in a coma, and it was hard to say that there would be big problems later. Thinking of this, he actually already had some agreement with Kagura's proposal. But in the end he rolled his eyes and said with a malicious look on his face, "I can approve your proposal, but, hee." Having said this, he laughed evilly and said, "You have to complete a task first and prove to me that you are capable of forming a team on your own." In Futada showed his impression, he had never met his parents. From the moment he can remember, he has been living in the orphanage of Sunagakur village. There is no gentle and pleasant dean like in the novel, nor is there a considerate and caring teacher. In fact, most of that kind of existence only exists in novels or plays. The orphanage where he lived was actually an education center for training soldiers. From the day he could remember, he was faced with almost non-stop training every day. After training every day, eat food that is not delicious but can definitely fill your stomach. But even so, no one around him would complain. Because those who would complain have long since been kicked out and have ended up nowhere. Every day he faces male instructors with resolute faces, or the so-called dean with a majestic face. Fortunately, there will always be a way for orphans like them to survive. Although life is tough, there are not many casualties actually caused by training. On such days, he finally celebrated his 10th birthday. And on this day, his birthday gift was a shuriken. On that afternoon, in that familiar training ground, he used that shuriken to insert into his friend's belly. Although he can't remember the name of that friend clearly now. But during those difficult years of his youth, it was the best friend in his life. They supported each other and encouraged each other, and they survived the devilish training. But he didn't expect that the final exam to graduate from here would be to kill his best friend. He could not remember the battle process clearly, but when he regained his memory, he found that he had already inserted the weapon into his friend's belly tightly. The eyes of my friend before his death did not reveal resentment or unwillingness, but instead revealed a kind of relief and guilt. Before he died, he muttered something, but he didn't hear it clearly at all. At that time, he didn't understand at all why there was a trace of guilt in that man's eyes even though he was the one who killed him. As his friend's body fell, his emotions seemed to be included in his death. He just held the bloody shuriken and left the orphanage where he had lived for several years. From that day on, he officially became a genin of Sunagakur village. At this time, as the 5 major countries had just been established, although the fighting on the surface stopped, the actual war turned to a dark world that people could not see. Although his combat ability is not strong, he seems to have had a talent for espionage since he was a child. After the superiors transferred him to the assassination force, he did more work of infiltrating the enemy, then selling out intelligence and then annihilating the opponent. At only 10 years old, he seems to know how to gain the trust of others. In this way, a few years later, he was promoted to Chunin. It was not long after he became a Chunin that he was sent to Konoha village as an undercover agent, when he was 15 years old. Different from the past, this time it will be a long-term mission. He will remain lurking there until he receives instructions from above. He joined Konoha village as a ninja from a surrounding village. In fact, this identity was very common in the early days of the 5 villages. A few years after entering Konoha, he had already gained the trust of the village and became a teacher at the Ninja Academy. Even among the 5 major countries, Konoha is the village that best represents peace. He lived a completely different life here than before, and the peaceful atmosphere here even made him feel a little unreal at times. However, this peaceful atmosphere did not soothe his heart, but made him more and more manic. No one knows that every time he sees those children with innocent smiles, what he is actually thinking about is how to kill them as quickly as possible. When I greet my neighbors every day, I am mentally imagining whether that person will still be able to smile if Konoha is destroyed. His childhood experiences caused a certain distortion in his heart. In fact, the reason why he hopes to be a spy is because he likes to see the resentful expressions of those who were betrayed by him when they finally knew the truth. That would even give him an inexplicable sense of pleasure. However, this mission actually lasted for 10 years. He changed from a 15-year-old boy to a 25-year-old young man. From a warrior who killed many people on the battlefield, he became a teacher of Rinhi in Konoha Ninja School. But no one knew how these seemingly peaceful 10 years had caused him to suffer in his heart. Finally, he waited for an opportunity. Taking advantage of his position, he learned about the existence of the Forbidden Book and its specific storage location. That is the work of the second Hokage, and I heard that there is even a Forbidden Book in it that can resurrect the dead. He immediately told this information to his superiors, and his superiors also attached great importance to this information. Sure enough, within a few days, instructions came from superiors. They will let other spies lurking in Konoha work together to steal this Forbidden Book. After several days of planning, late one night, they finally took action. The process of implementing the plan was smoother than he imagined. Holding the huge scroll, the group of them immediately escaped according to the planned route. However, Konoha's reaction speed far exceeded their original estimate. In just one night, the road to Sunagakur village was blocked. Fortunately, they hired ninjas from Yuyan village in advance, so they were not directly searched by Anbu everywhere. In the end, everyone was forced to decide to open the Forbidden Book in public. Then as long as one person can escape back, he can take these forbidden skills back to complete the mission. However, the moment they opened the book, everyone's expressions froze. Because there is not even a single word in the so-called Forbidden Book. At this moment, Shota Erda immediately realized that all of this was Konoha's plan. People like myself are just pawns in their plan. It was that night that the masked Anbu finally discovered them. A fierce battle broke out. It is a pity that almost all of them are only capable of Chunin, and most of them have been engaged in espionage activities for a long time, and their frontal combat capabilities are not strong. Just 10 minutes after the battle, almost everyone on their side was wiped out. Just when Shota Erda was almost desperate, a powerful ninja rescued him from the pile of dark ninjas. It is the hired ninja from a Megakure village. The ninja named Hanzo told himself that he would leave after receiving the mission and taking him to a certain target location. For such an arrangement, Shota Fuda could only silently accept it. After all, he also knew that as he was listed as the top offender by Konoha, it would be difficult for him to return to Sunagakur village through regular channels in the future. Unexpectedly, they encountered a group of kids from Konoha on the road. Perhaps because he thought that he was being played by those high-level officials in Konoha, he could hardly restrain his murderous intention towards these brats from Konoha. However, Hanzo did not allow him to do this, and he knew the reason very well. He would do the same thing otherwise. After all, there is no need to offend that powerful country for an escort mission. Unexpectedly, an accident happened later. That Danzo chased after me. As a spy who has been collecting information, he naturally knows who Danzo is. But what happened next was going in a direction he couldn't understand. For the trash he held hostage, that annoying-looking Uchiha brat actually proposed a deal. And the content of the deal was to release the hostages himself, and then he would be responsible for stopping Danzo. Who does he think he is? Uchiha Madara. But what was even more unexpected was that Hanzo actually agreed to the deal. Although he was unwilling in his heart, he still let go of the kid in his hand. Who would have known that when Hanzo was escaping behind him, Danzo actually stopped chasing him? How on earth did that Uchiha brat do it? After taking themselves through the country of rain, they came to their final destination, the country of grass. This is a small country far away from the kingdom of wind, where sand-hidden village is located, and sandwiched between the kingdom of earth and the kingdom of fire. The people in Konoha certainly didn't expect that they would be brought here. After completing himself, Hanzo left without saying a word and returned to a Megakure village. As for himself, he found a nearby village and quickly integrated into the village as a foreigner. After all, dealing with people is his strength. 2 weeks passed before I knew it. Shota Fuda, who had just walked out of the house, greeted his neighbors warmly. Walking on the dilapidated path of the village, he was calculating the time to leave. It was last week that Konoha evacuated all the Jonin in the Rain Country. After more than a week, it is estimated that there are not many Anin left in the Rain Country. It's time for me to leave here and return to Sunagakure village. While he was thinking about something, he accidentally bumped into someone on the side of the road. He turned around habitually and planned to apologize. However, the moment he turned his head, a Sharingan with 3 Magatama caught his eye. For a moment, he felt that his thoughts and will were being invaded rapidly. He knew very well in his heart that if the person in front of him completely invaded his will, he would probably be in bad luck. But he was powerless to stop all this. At the moment when his thoughts were about to disappear, a certain scene buried deep in his memory suddenly appeared in front of him. It was a training ground illuminated by the setting sun, and standing in front of him was his friend who was killed by him. The man spit out a mouthful of blood and said in an inaudible voice, "I'm sorry, Fuda Shota. You can only walk on your own in the future." Quote. By the way, I remembered his name. That's my good friend, his name is Long Kitai. Seeing Shota Fuda who was under his control in front of him, Kagura and Tsunade and others behind him finally breathed a sigh of relief. Although it was strange why this person suddenly smiled at the end of his struggle, the most important thing was that they finally completed their mission. Yes, the task given to them by Hiruzen Sarutobi that day was capture Shota Fuda alive. In order to complete this task, they followed the clues along the way for more than 10 days. Finally, they caught up to the village and locked their target. Looking at the dull-eyed Fuda Shota, Kagura looked at her companions behind her and smiled. He waved his little hand and said, "Let's go, we're going home." Konoha 25, 3 years after the Danzo incident. Within the Kingdom of Water. Similar to the Uzumaki country that Kagura and others have visited, the Water Country is a huge island far away from the mainland. It's just that its land area is much larger than that of the Whirlpool country, and there are many scattered small islands around it. On one of the small islands, a group of Chunin from Kurigakure village were running away with frightened faces. One of them was carrying a girl with red hair under his arm. These ninjas were struggling to escape forward while turning their heads to look back from time to time. The leader among them was obviously at the front, gritting his teeth and roaring in a low voice. How could we meet them? Those monsters from Konoha. However, before he finished speaking, a huge shadow suddenly appeared in front of them. A small mountain-like object suddenly landed in front of them. Taking a closer look, it was a toad that looked like a small mountain. The toad was holding a pipe in one hand, taking a leisurely puff, and calmly exhaled at the ant-like enemies in front of him. A Wengran voice came out of his mouth. "Hey, little Jiraiya, is this the group of people?" As he asked, a young man with white hair slowly walked out from his head. He glanced condescendingly at the group of people below, and when he saw the trapped girl, a trace of contempt flashed in his eyes. He did not answer the question of the toad at his feet, but said dissatisfiedly, "How many times have I told you, Mrs. When you call my name, don't add a small character in front of it. I'm 12 years old." Compared with before, Jiraiya did have a lot of changes at this time. The casual kimono attire he was used to was gone, and now he was wearing a Jonin combat uniform similar to Kagura's. If there is any difference, it should be that the color of the vest is not purple, but red. In response to Jiraiya's protest, Gamabunta still calmly took a puff of cigarette and replied calmly. Okay, little Jiraiya. I understand, little Jiraiya. Quote. Faced with the rogue attitude of the giant toad at his feet, Jiraiya could only do nothing. He pretended not to have heard those words, and suddenly pointed his finger at the crowd below and shouted in a serious voice. Let that girl go. Upon hearing this, the leader looked towards the people around him, and the two nodded. Suddenly the team split into two teams and rushed out in both directions. Seeing the enemies below fleeing separately, Jiraiya did not stop him in any way, but shook his head regretfully. The leader of the team on the left saw that the toad did not move at all. Before he could feel the joy in his heart, something unexpected happened in front of the team. They saw a hand suddenly appear out of thin air in front of them, holding a dagger in that hand, and directly chopped down the ninja who was rushing forward. As the ninja screamed, the people behind him stopped in alarm. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the hand in the air. As the hand was slowly retracted, they discovered another young man standing on the tree. The young man had long, silky black hair, snow-white skin, and a pair of vertical pupils filled with a hint of coldness. He was dressed the same as Jiraiya, except that his vest was black. Unlike his somewhat intrusive appearance, he seemed very polite when he spoke. He bowed slightly to everyone and then said softly, Sorry everyone, I'm afraid I can't let you leave from here. Looking at the young man in front of him, the leader swallowed nervously, but before he could speak, a loud noise suddenly came from behind him. He quickly looked toward the rear and saw that the other group of people who had originally separated had disappeared. It was replaced by a cloud of dust. You scumbags who robbed girls, die. Following a vicious female voice, a figure of a young girl could be vaguely seen gradually walking out of the fog. Until the smoke dissipated, the girl's figure finally appeared in front of them. This person is Tsunade. After 3 years, her hair has grown longer and is still tied into a high ponytail behind her back. She was dressed the same as Jiraiya and the others, except her vest was cyan. After realizing that he and others were vaguely surrounded by these 3 people, the leader's face darkened. But at this moment, the last sound made him break out in cold sweat. Because the voice came from behind him. How many times have I told you not to talk nonsense when performing tasks? Why don't you go, stop these? If they were really so obedient, why would they need the police? And Jiraiya, where did you learn the phrase, let that girl go? I told you not to read so many weird books. Quote. Although the tone of these words was very relaxed, the leader felt as if his whole body had frozen. He looked back with difficulty, and what caught his eye was a pair of Sharingan. After kicking the enemy who had fallen to the ground, Kagura curled her lips in boredom as she looked at Tsunade, who was examining the girl. Yes, this is the 7th team on the mission. This time, the task they received was to rescue a robbed girl commissioned by the Kingdom of Whirlpool. Looking at the girl's bright red hair, Kagura sighed slightly. Just like the plot in his impression, various countries have begun to reach out to the Kingdom of Whirlpool. As the Kurigakure village that is geographically closest, it is naturally one of the leading criminals. But he knew very well in his heart that all this was just the beginning, and the demise of the Whirlpool country was inevitable. After checking that the girl was fine, Tsunade took the initiative to carry the girl on her back. Orochimaru walked up to Kagura and asked strangely. By the way, the police you just mentioned. What is that? Kagura was stunned and pretended to be stupid randomly. Kaido. Did I say that? You must have heard wrong. I said ninja, ninja. Ninja. I should have heard it right. Orochimaru scratched his face in confusion. 1 day later, inside the whirlpool. Looking at the scene of the girl who returned safely, hugging her family and crying bitterly. Kagura and others also showed a smile of satisfaction. The staff of the Kingdom of Whirlpool on the side looked at the 4 people in Class 7 and sighed. In the past 3 years, these 4 genin from Konoha have become famous. Although he only has the title of genin, everyone inside cannot be underestimated. In fact, they have been recognized as possessing at least Chunin's strength. Especially the leader Uchiha Kagura, one of the Jonin who fought against him once said. I think the reason why Konoha didn't promote him to Jonin was to trick the ninjas of other countries. If you give this kid 2 more years, I won't be surprised if you say he can challenge the shadow level. As his strength was recognized by more and more people, the nickname he had in the ninja school was mentioned again. The monster from Konoha. This is just a title Kagura has been given again over the years. After completing the mission, receiving their reward, and bidding farewell to the girl's family who thanked them, Kagura and the others set off on their way back to the village. While walking, Tsunade suddenly ran to Kagura, hugged his right hand with both hands, and said coquettishly, "How about we go shopping and then go back, okay?" I have to say that in the past 3 years, apart from her height, the biggest change in Tsunade was that she finally started to grow. Although it is not as grand as the future, Kagura can swear with his Sharingan that it has at least reached B. Feeling the soft touch of her right hand, Kagura couldn't help but raise the corners of her mouth, and an unnatural blush appeared on her face. Tsunade naturally saw Kagura's changes. She peeked at Kagura's embarrassed expression mischievously, but hugged Kagura tighter. Jiraiya and Orochimaru on the side were already used to this scene. Jiraiya was walking, opening a book he had just found and reading it carefully. Over the years, it may be that Kagura's abilities have really impressed him. Especially after he recovered from his injuries and heard Orochimaru and Tsunade describe Kagura's open duel with Danzo for him. He regarded Kagura as the boss by default. Or maybe it was because he knew in his heart that it was impossible for Tsunade to have male-female feelings for him. Anyway, the vague affection he had for Tsunade over the years has been decisively abandoned by him. So as long as the heart dies early, there will be no such thing as licking the dog. As for Orochimaru, he's not interested in things between men and women. If you have the time, you might as well study more ninjutsu. However, this time, watching the scene of Tsunade and Kagura flirting, he rarely interrupted. I think we should go back as soon as possible, otherwise if we fail to make it this time, we will have to wait another year. After hearing his words, Kagura suddenly woke up. With a little regret, he took his hand away from Tsunade and continued seriously. Well, Orochimaru is right. Let's go back, we must make time to participate this time. Take the Chunin exam. Yes, the 4 of them are still genin. But this is not a conspiracy by the top management of Konoha village, as some conspiracy theories speculated by the outside world. It's simply because they missed the Chunin exams twice in a row. Like all our current exams, the Chunin exam requires early registration and has a clear deadline. However, during the registration period for the last 2 Chunin exams, all 4 of them went to do tasks. And because there is no teacher in charge, no one can help them register. Kagura is also very helpless about this. This task is not like any clerical job, and you can't control the time at all. It's okay to have clear and fixed enemies, but what I'm most afraid of is a missing person mission like this one. It only took half an hour to defeat those Chunin, but who knew they had been following that group of people for more than 10 days. It is precisely because of such coincidences that they are still genin until now. In fact, Sarutobi Hiruzen also considered whether to directly promote them to Chunin. After all, in his opinion, Kagura was more than capable of becoming a Jonin. But unlike during the war, the assessment system for ninjas at all levels in the village had just been implemented by him. If you ignore the system and forcibly promote them to Chunin, you will undoubtedly lift a stone and drop it on your own foot. Didn't you see? A young man who came back from his travels and was able to resist an enemy like Nagato was just a genin just because he didn't take the exam. When Kagura mentioned the Chunin exam, everyone's faces became serious. Tsunade said angrily, "Yes, I must catch up this time. If I don't pass the Chunin exam this time, I will be nagged by Grandma Mito again." Quote. Jiraiya also turned his attention away from the book in his hand and said, "Hitaki Sakumo, who was in the same class as us, passed Chunin 2 years ago. If we don't hurry up, maybe next time we see him, we'll have to call him Jonin-sama." Quote. Hearing Jiraiya's words, Tsunade curled her lips in displeasure and picked up a white puppy following Kagura in her hands. Looking at the puppy in front of her with an obviously unhappy expression, she laughed happily and began to ravage its little face with her hands. This is a puppy that appeared next to Kagura a year ago. According to Kagura, this is the ninja dog he trained. In addition to helping them convey information when doing tasks, it is also very helpful in tracking enemies. Of course, what they don't know is that this seemingly naive puppy is actually one-tail Shukaku. Just a year ago, through his unremitting efforts, One Tail's integration finally reached 100%. Kagura couldn't help but complain about the system settings here. Obviously it only took him 2 months for the first 50%, but it took him nearly 2 years for the next 50%. But what surprised him was that just after his one-tail fusion reached 100%, the information about the two-tail fusion was automatically turned on in his system properties. As that message appeared, a pure white cat-like creature with 2 tails suddenly appeared in his body. That is of course the second tail, Nekomata. But before he was happy for a long time, he discovered something that gave him a headache. That is why One Tail, which originally seemed gentle, became obviously agitated after the second tail appeared. The 2 little guys would fight inside him every day if they disagreed. Although it would not really affect his body, it would also make him feel noisy. Fortunately, after the fusion reached 100%, he could finally release the tailed beast from his body freely. Although there are certain restrictions, the tailed beast cannot leave him too far, otherwise it will be automatically taken back. But it's still a good solution. So after some transformations by One Tail, a white puppy appeared in the team. And Kagura is convinced that there will be another kitten with 2 tails in the near future. Even in the future there will be turtles, orangutans, foxes and so on. In the past 3 years, Kagura's various attributes have also undergone great changes. Now its properties are: Eye Technique, 3 Magatama Sharingan, progress 72.3%. Physical Skills, 6th Gate, Gate of View, progress 67.2%. Chakra, Jonin level, 85.6% progress. Tailed Beast, 2 tails, fusion degree 78%. Each attribute has been greatly improved, but except for the physical skill that has been upgraded by 1 level, the others still stay at the original state. Kagura also understood in his heart that as his strength grew, he slowly began to encounter a bottleneck, and he would no longer have the rapid growth rate he had at the beginning. As for ninjutsu, the system has only released 3 missions in the past 3 years. Among these 3 missions, 2 were B-level ninjutsu, and only 1 drew an S-level ninjutsu. Let's not mention the B-level ninjutsu for now, let's focus on the S-level ninjutsu. This is Kagura's first taijutsu class in ninjutsu, 8 Gates Dunka. In fact, 8 Gates Dunjia can only be classified as A-level ninjutsu in the original classification. But obviously Kagura inherited a ninjutsu with the power of yakai, so the system classified it as S-level. Some people may ask, isn't Kagura's attribute itself identified by the 8 gates in 8 Gates Dunkai? Doesn't this mean that he knows the 8 Gates Dunka ninjutsu? This is indeed just a misunderstanding. As we all know, the opening of 8 gates has a great relationship with the user's physical fitness. The better your physical fitness, the more doors you can open, so 8 gates is used as the standard. Including Kagura's current physical attributes indicating 6 gates, it does not mean that he can open the gate of view without injury. Only when the progress reaches 100% can the door level of this stage be opened without damage. Of course, Kagura has also successfully copied many ninjutsu using Sharingan over the years while fighting different enemies. But since these ninjutsu levels are not high, we won't mention them here for now. After rushing all the way, they finally made it back to Konoha village within the registration period. Signing up is actually very simple. You can actually sign up at the window next to where they often receive tasks. After solemnly filling in the names of the 4 people, they handed over the mission of the Kingdom of Whirlpool and walked out. As soon as they came out, they saw 3 familiar people. The silver-haired one is none other than Hitaki Tsukumo, whom they mentioned earlier that he had been promoted to Chunin. Next to him is Mad Dai wearing a green tights and a watermelon head. The last one is a handsome guy with long light blue hair. This person is Tsunade's lover in the original work, Kato Dan. Seeing Kagura and others, Mad Dai took the lead in greeting them full of energy. "Hey, my fierce rivals, are you back today?" Kagura nodded and explained. "Yes, we rushed back to register for the Chunin exam. By the way, Mad Dai, you are still a genin, right? Have you signed up?" Having said this, Mad Dai showed his trademark gums, confident Kaido. "No, my team leader said I wasn't strong enough to take the exam, so he didn't report my name." "No, there's nothing to be proud of. What are you doing with such a confident look?" When Kagura was speechless, Kato looked at Tsunade and others and said gently, "Everyone knows your abilities, and you have already surpassed Chunin in strength. So don't be nervous, you will definitely pass the exam." Quote. Kato Dan was actually 1 year older than them, and he was their senior brother in the previous year at the Ninja Academy. But after becoming teammates with Hatake Sakumo, who is also a Chunin, I have gradually become familiar with Kagura and the others over the years. Looking at Kato Dan, who was as gentle as a big brother, several people nodded unconsciously. Afterwards, several people exchanged their experiences on recent missions and then left each other. After saying goodbye to Kato Dan and others, Kagura looked strangely at Tsunade beside her from time to time. Although the two have only maintained a tacit ambiguity over the years, given their ages, they have never taken the initiative to expose that relationship. But based on the man's strong possessive desire, when he saw Kato Dan, he still felt a little uneasy. The person just now was Tsunade's lover in the original work, although now the whole plot has changed dramatically because of his appearance. But who knows if this fateful connection will have any effect. Feeling Kagura's peeking eyes, Tsunade looked back keenly, widened her almond eyes and asked, "What are you doing?" Kagura was discovered and immediately looked forward, forcing Kaido to remain calm. "No, I didn't say anything." But based on a woman's unique sixth sense, Tsunade concluded that Kagura was lying. She rolled her eyes and suddenly jumped to Kagura's side, holding his arm again. She stretched her head close to Kagura's ear, and her small cherry mouth said softly in a very seductive voice, "Really? Hiss. Where did this little goblin learn all these tricks?" Seeing Kagura's expression that seemed to be frozen, Tsunade deliberately smiled. She let go of Kagura's arm and ran to Kagura. Putting his hands on his lower back, he leaned down and looked at Kagura and said mischievously, "HMPH, who told you to hide something from me?" After saying that, he stopped looking at Kagura, turned around and walked in front of him. Kagura smiled helplessly and followed silently. The afterglow of the setting sun shone on the streets of Konoha, elongating the silhouettes of the two people until they merged into one point at the end. Oh, no. At this time, there were two friends behind them who were eating all-you-can-eat dog food. The next day, Kagura and others received a message. This time Chunin will be a little different from the previous two. This time the Chunin exam will be jointly organized by Konoha Village, Kurigakure Village, and Kumogakure Village. This is also to reflect the friendly cooperation between the three forces. Yes, you heard it right, this is to reflect the friendship of the three countries. For him, who had just gone to the Kingdom of Water and slaughtered a group of Chunin from Cloud Hidden Village, this was like a huge joke. But at the same time, he also knew very well that this was just a political method between big countries. No matter how they fight in secret, they even want to kill your whole village. But on the surface, everyone still has to maintain the illusion of friendship and love. Shaking her head, Kagura also began to prepare for this Chunin exam. In order to cope with this Chunin exam, the entire team of their 7th class suspended their mission. Each adjusts her status in this short period of time. For Kagura, although his strength has far surpassed the Chunin level, out of habit, it is still necessary to search for information on the Chunin exam. After all, he knew from his memory that the Chunin exam was called a written test. The scene turned to Union Village in the Kingdom of Thunder. Third Hokage, a young man was standing in front of Eye. This young man wears an eye patch on his left eye, a hat in the shape of the word, Earth, on his head, and is wearing a black combat top unique to Union Village. I looked at the young man in front of him with satisfaction and said in a rich voice, "Tushiro, as the main representative of our Kingdom of Thunder this time, you must work hard to win glory for me." When the young man in front of him heard this, he didn't say much, he just nodded indifferently. Hokage didn't care either. He looked at the map on his desktop and continued. Although it is only peaceful on the surface, this kind of multinational joint assessment is still an important way to express our country's strength. Such a pity. Having said this, he couldn't help but have a headache. The rebellion of the Gold and Silver Brothers a few years ago was a fatal blow to Union Village. In addition to the shocking move of killing second Hokage on the spot, the most important thing is the hidden danger brought by the will of these two brothers to Union Village. In fact, as a militant, he did not understand the thoughts of the two brothers. If we look deeper, he is also a member of the Hokage faction in the village. Since even he thinks so, one can imagine how many followers of the two brothers there are in Union Village. The rebellion was almost devastating to the village. Let's just say that the 20 Golden Horn troops under their command can almost be said to be the 20 strongest Jonin in Kumogakure village. However, the mainstay of these villages was slaughtered in the battle with Senju Tobarama. After the news came that Jinzhou Yinzhou was injured and escaped, many young people in the village who agreed with their ideas secretly left the village and chose to follow them. These were the main reasons why he rushed out to hunt down the two brothers. If those two brothers don't die, Union Village will be split up soon. Fortunately, all this was stopped due to his efforts. But at the same time, because of this, among the young people of this generation, only Toshiro in front of him can give him a little hope. Just as he was deep in thought, an explosion suddenly came from somewhere in the village not far away. Looking at the direction where the explosion came from, there was not much surprise on Raikage's face, but a trace of depression flashed across his face. He murmured, "Is there another problem with the containment of the two-tailed Nekomata? There is also an even more troublesome 8 tails. Hey, it's really hard to find something like Jinchuriki." The scene turned again, on an island facing the sea. An unusually young-looking boy was looking at the people below with his chin in his hand. At this time, 7 young men of different shapes were standing below him. Some of them have short black hair, no eyebrows, and a large cross scar on the right side of their face. Some have long orange hair that reaches their waists, have sharp teeth, and have fluffy bandages around their necks. There is also a tall man with slender limbs and a Kurigakure Anbu mask on his face. But no matter their size and appearance, they all have one thing in common. That is, they are all holding a strange-shaped weapon. Although some can be seen as a huge chopping knife, some are just slender bayonets. But some of them look like thick long sticks wrapped in scrolls, making it hard to tell whether they are weapons or scrolls. The young man at the top glanced at everyone with his scarlet eyes, and after a long time he slowly said, "Today, I officially grant you the title of the 7 ninja swordsmen. I believe you know what this title means. The ninja swords in your hands are masterpieces crafted by generations of ancestors in the village. I hope you will not insult them." Quote. After hearing what the young man said, the 7 people knelt down in unison and responded in unison. "We understand, Mizukage-sama." The one speaking above was the newly appointed 3rd Mizukage of Kurigakure village, Gotachibana Yagura. I'll explain the timeline here. Some people may wonder if the age doesn't match up here. But officials did not provide his actual age. But according to the official statement, this guy is born with a baby face. He seemed young when he became Mizukage, but in fact he already had grandchildren. If we really go by comparison, he may be older than Sarutobi Hiruzen. In addition, since the 3rd Mizukage does not have any information or appearance records, in order to ensure the normal development of the plot, adjustments can only be made. Closing parenthesis. If Kagura were present at this time, he would definitely be surprised to see the 3rd Mizukage in front of him. Although the 3rd Mizukage's name is never revealed in the plot, according to his impression, the 3rd Mizukage should be a person with long black hair and straight hair. The baby face in front of me should actually be the 4th Mizukage. It seems that due to his arrival, the butterfly effect has taken effect again, allowing this Gotachibana Yagura to become a Mizukage ahead of schedule. Looking at the people who were bowing respectfully in front of him, Goju Yagura nodded with satisfaction and said, "I deliberately suppressed your application for the Chunin exam last year just to allow you to perform well in this joint exam. But I estimate that Konoha and Cloud Hidden Village will have similar preparations. It seems that a genius named Uchiha has appeared in Konoha in recent years. Even a team of Chunin in the village were defeated by him earlier. Snort. Is he really worthy of the name of a monster? Go ahead and get ready. I'm afraid this exam is not as easy as you think." Quote. After hearing the order, the figures of the people lowering their heads below flashed and left. As everyone left, Goju Yagura raised his head and looked somewhere. There was a circle of water, and there seemed to be something huge swimming underneath the water. Its back shell covered with spikes can be vaguely seen emerging from the water. This is none other than Isobu, the 3 tails adopted by Kurigakure village. Like 3rd Raikage, Goju Yagura was also having a headache thinking about Jinchuriki at this time. But unlike Hokage, Kagura has already laid out several plans. Including the mission that was disturbed by Kagura and others not long ago, he specially selected Jinchuriki candidates from the country of Whirlpool. As everyone knows, the best container, the girl from the Uzumaki clan, is undoubtedly the best candidate. But after all, he had to maintain the superficial peace of the countries, so he could only secretly send a Chunin-level team to capture the target. But he didn't expect that the entire Chunin team sent out for safety reasons would be completely defeated by a Genin team. Looking at the three tails who seemed to be enjoying their freedom, he murmured. It seems that I have to choose another target. If it doesn't work out in the end, then it can only be up to me. At this time, somewhere far away from the three major countries, in a dark underground space. This underground space is filled with tree roots and branches. On one of the largest tree roots, there is a huge humanoid statue. It looks like a huge humanoid with 9 eyes, its color and body are like dead wood, and there are 10 pillars protruding from its back. At this time, a pair of reincarnation eyes opened in the darkness. He connected his body to the tree trunk behind him. This person was Uchiha Madara, the ancestor of Kagura. His sight seemed to pass through the layers of land and looked towards the kingdom of water on the sea. A hoarse and low voice echoed throughout the space. It seems that we are about to start executing the plan. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.